After all, it is the cause of many problems for our community. One of those problems being the Deltopia movie and its intentions. Isla Vista, according to the 2020 census, has a population of 15,733 people. The 2023 Deltopia event drew an estimated crowd of 15,000 people. My money says that 15,000 people, maybe 1/3, roughly 5,000 or less, were Isla Vista residents. And the reason I say this is due to the fact that many people I spoke with before Deltopia occurred, who were all college-age students and residents of Isla Vista, said they were getting the hell out of Dodge. This simply states what we know, and that is Deltopia is considered an unpopular event by even the student-age Isla Vista residents. That means the remaining 2/3, 10,000 or more, were in fact not members of our community who came out to live the Deltopia fantasy portrayed in the Deltopia movie. The thing is, it's not a fantasy, it's a reality. It has a wide array of negative and in some cases fatal consequences. I would say to ask Jude Corinelli, third-year UCSB physics major, but there's one problem. Jude is deceased as a result of a fentanyl overdose that occurred during a Deltopia party. His body laid there with 0 vital signs for an undetermined length of time before someone actually noticed the situation. By then it was way too late. Add to that the fact that emergency medical personnel couldn't get to him in a timely manner. It might have made a difference, but the crowds deterred their efforts. He's dead now, and that's a recorded fact. We're faced with numerous pieces of factual evidence that can lead to the condemnation of Deltopia, but such a condemnation would prove an unpopular move, possibly even cost votes for any public office. But hey, popularity versus public safety. Take note, none of what I'm saying here will be popular with the cool crowd that wants to see Deltopia continue on its present and current trajectory. But I don't care about popularity. I care about the facts, what they stand for, and they stand as they are. In all, again, I commend the IVCSD Board of Directors for taking a stance on the topic of the Deltopia movie. But as I said, the movie is simply a function of Deltopia itself. If there's anything to condemn, it's Deltopia. In the name of safety for the 10,733 Isla Vista residents that don't support Deltopia and the antics, it should be something to consider. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for those comments. Are there any other public comments at this time? Yes, you may speak.
Hello, everyone. For those of you I haven't met before, my name is Michaela Martinez. I'm an associated student, off-campus senator, a student leader, and an advocate for those in my community. As all of you most likely already know, this summer we lost another life to the cliffs of Isla Vista. This death, just like the ones before it, was tragic, but unlike those, it has become the catalyst for change. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who has aided in any efforts to come up with a solution to the question, how do we prevent this from happening again? I know that it's a difficult question, and there are a lot of different ideas on how best to solve the problem. I'm here to discuss the Supervisor Laura Katz's 8-point plan on Isla Vista bluff safety as it pertains to my fellow students in Isla Vista.
Excuse me. So I appreciate your comment. We'll be having a public comment on that item in a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll get to that item and then we can have the more continuous forum. Are there any public comment on items not on today's agenda? All right. Thank you. Thank you for understanding.
Does that make sense to you? That's how the Brown Act, it works.
Yeah,
The meeting are structured that.
I just didn't have the agenda.
Yeah. The public comment is for things that aren't on the agenda. And then when we have the item, that's when you provide comment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So seeing no further public comment on items not on this agenda, we will move to our discussion and action items. So we have item 4.1, Supervisor Katz's 8-point plan for bluff safety. And as we just talked about public comment, I'm assuming a lot of you have public comments to share. So I will be asking folks to limit their comments to 3 minutes time. I will be asking folks to please share their name also. And thank you.
Did you want me to go or do you want to go to public comment first?
If you could share just some of the overview of the plan, if there's anyone here who hasn't considered the plan.
Sure. So we, what's on the agenda today is Supervisor Laura Capps' 8-point plan on bluff safety. It's based on discussions that they had with us and the board meeting that we had about this about a month ago. But we didn't write this plan, but it was inspired by what we had put together and spoken about. It has, the main part of the plan, the first part is fencing and increasing the height requirement to 6 feet in county land and private residences. Let me back up. This plan there's no concrete legal language or ordinance or anything actually on the table. It's a concept of a plan. So it's nothing is happening yet. This is us providing input on the concept of the plan. So there's no ordinance that has all these things written. So those things can still be fine-tuned. So the fencing part is raising the height requirement and having anti-climbing and having it easier for the property owners to be incentivized to come into compliance. And Supervisor Cap said that this will come to the Board of Supervisors by November 7th. The next thing is adding on lighting to the fences, and especially in public parks. They've already put up some pilot lights at Walter Capps Park. Next is adding additional warning signs at the parks and private properties. Number 4 is bathrooms, which we've been putting money towards, and we'll have a more direct update on that later on the agenda, but there's 4 right now, 3 we're funding and 1 they're funding out in the public spaces and DP. Education, this is something we initiated already a year ago, but it would be just continuing education with the schools and with us. And we're going to be doing a lot this month on education. Currently, we have social media ads up of our cliff safety campaign, blanketing Instagram. Number 6 is horticulture. So it's to install shrubbery and different bushes and plants that make it hard to access the bluff edge. 7 would be to have a memorial for the 13 people who died, and 13 or more who died. And we've been talking already with Supervisor Capps and AS about this. And then finally would be to have enforcement specific to this issue, which is the next thing on the agenda, the social host ordinance, which would give law enforcement the ability to stop a party if there's unsafe conditions around the bluff edge or on the other side of the fence. So that's the 8-point plan that she put together.
Perfect. Thank you for giving us a breakdown on that. Do any directors at this time have questions they would like to ask? All right, I see no questions from my directors, so now I will open this item up for public comment. Is there public comment? Yes, you may restart.
Would you like me to restart the whole thing?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hello, everyone. For those of you I haven't met before, my name is Michaela Martinez. I'm an associated student senator, an off-campus senator, a student leader, and advocate for those in my community. As all of you most likely already know, this summer we lost another life to the cliffs of Isla Vista. This death, like the ones before it, was tragic, but unlike others, it has become a catalyst for change. I want to express my gratitude for everyone who has aided in any efforts to come up with a solution of the question, how do we prevent this from happening again? I know that it's a difficult one and that there are a lot of different ideas on how best to solve the problem. I'm here today to discuss the Laura Capps 8-point plan for Isla Vista bluff safety as it pertains to my fellow students in Isla Vista. I'm here to speak for my fellow students who have elected me to advocate for them. There are many wonderful aspects of this plan that will promote safety and potentially prevent tragic accidents of the students of Isla Vista and the rest of the community, who make up the majority of the population and are most likely to suffer these fatalities. From the potential higher plexiglass fences to the deliberate placement of native plants to protect students from getting too close to edges, there are many ideas within the plan that I believe will be supported by the community at large as well as the student body. Unfortunately, I'm not here to simply sing my praises of the Capps plan, rather I'm here to express my concern. It's widely known that one of the biggest issues worrying Isla Vista students about the area is over-policing. That brings me to point 8 of the Capps plan, enforcement. As far as I'm aware, there's been a lack of information on what this 8-point really means. This vagueness is worrying to many of the students that I call my constituents, especially those who are already targeted more heavily by Isla Vista law enforcement. I'm here to urge the powers that be to be clear and transparent with their intentions to make these changes in the community. There's a large part of my community that wants to join in finding a solution to this tragic pattern, but we will not stand by and watch the losses of these lives be used as stepping stones for more and more over-policing of our streets.
Thank you for those comments. Yes.
Hello, members of the board and members of the public. My name is Micah Littlepage, and I'm a UCSD student and a member of the Associated Student Senate as well. I'm just here to raise some student concerns I've heard related to the Laura Cass 8-point safety plan. Obviously, the loss of any community member, let alone 12, is a terrible tragedy that must be addressed. That is why myself, as well as the majority of students, are in support of a majority of this plan. And we hope for an effective, speedy, resolute implementation. However, there are many reservations and quite a few unanswered questions when it comes to Section 8 and law enforcement in this plan. As students and community members of Isla Vista, we deserve specifics of any plan that have the potential to reshape policing and public safety. The language of Section 8 in the plan is exceptionally vague, only stating that the police lack the ability to break up parties and where people are sitting on fences, and that with the IVCSD, the Sheriff's Office, and the community, we are working to strengthen the tools they have to prevent unsafe situations from escalating into dangerous situations. Without specifics on how the Sheriff's Office will strengthen the tools they have to prevent unsafe situations, students and other residents are left in the dark on issues related to their own public safety. This is especially concerning considering the relationship between many Isla Vistans and the police department. Many students are rightfully hesitant about granting any more powers to local authorities to break up parties or other social gatherings. In addition, granting additional policing power without fully consulting the community risks already increasing existing inequalities, as well as contributing to the criminalization of many aspects of our IB community. That is why I would like to ask the board to seek clarification on any law enforcement points before formally endorsing the plan. Police safety must be addressed, but without proper diligence and full transparency, we risk severing community unity and risking student safety. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Yes, you may go first.
I just wanted to make a comment. I'm having difficulty hearing. I'm not sure if anyone else is.
Yes.
So if the speakers could be a little bit louder, please, that would benefit,
Or stand, so they're not talking through other people.
please.
Okay. Yes, if future commenters could please also stand, that would be helpful. Yes, Janet, you can
Hi,
go.
everybody. Hello, board. My name is Janet Stitch. I'm a resident here in Isla Vista. And I took a good look at the 8-point plan, and I really appreciate the focus on bluff safety. I did think that a little bit of clarifying language needed to be put in. And specifically, I was looking at fencing. I don't know if you have the plan in front of you, but if you go down to the 4th bullet, it says for private property owners, to streamline this process for private property owners will be providing incentives to make these changes as easy as possible to come into compliance. And just when you read this, it sounds like it is implying that all property owners will be incentivized to comply with erecting the fence. And really it is likely that for some of the 70 buildings on the bluff, fencing may not be the best option or even feasible. We don't know that yet. So just to clarify this, that kind of reads as a one-size-fits-all option, I would like to add the word appropriate. So then it would say, namely to streamline this process for appropriate private property owners. And this is just a clarifying point of the bullet, which still allows for any plan that might go forward. And my second clarifying language is exactly the same thing, only it's under horticulture. And under horticulture, the second bullet, the implication, it says, once we have the recommendations, we will share this information with property owners for them to do the same. And again, the implication is that property owners mean all property owners. That's why I would again like to add the word appropriate. So we will share this information with appropriate property owners for them to do the same. And then, if I may, just in terms of formatting, I think horticulture should be put under fencing because it flows together well. And maybe education would be just above enforcement and alcohol drug use. And that is all that I have to say really about how this is worded. One thing that I think should be considered when we're talking about a minimum of a 6-foot fence is students may still want to climb over the fence. And so you don't want to have a fence that's so high that when they come down the other side, they're completely out of control. You want to have it at a height that is going to discourage climbing, but not so high that when they fall on the bluff side, they have no coordinated landing. So it's just a really serious consideration of how high the fence is going to be. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Yes.
First time I've had to stand.
You're
I'm
old.
only 5'11". My name's Henry Soria, 36-year resident of Isla Vista. Came here for a skateboard contest back in 1986, fell in love with the place, stuck around for education, a career, and I live here in IV. I don't live on the west end. I live actually in the frat row area. I've always lived in the active area of IV. One of the things that's always been a big issue is cliff falls in Isla Vista. And one of the things that Director Brandt and I talked about was what we call hostile horticulture. And as a naturalist, environmentalist kind of guy, I believe that putting a little swath of cactus, Nepales or something like that, on both the forward and trailing edge of where the fence line is a great way to keep people away from it. I don't care how drunk or messed up you are, you're not gonna want to tangle with a spiny plant. That's a fact, okay? I know. But one of the things I keep hearing is about the point number 8 about enforcement. And one of the things I have to point out is that the over enforcement of law enforcement, or the over presence of law enforcement, that's a myth. Actually, the numbers have gone down. I remember a time when there was anywhere from 6 to 12 officers on duty to patrol 12,000, 15,000 people. Now you have maybe at any given shift, you might have 5, 4, 6, it just varies. So the over policing of the area is not really the issue. That's not what's making people fall off the cliffs. We're seeing a lot of issues. I discussed about this at one of the last meetings with my public comment. I mentioned about intoxication, but like I said, when you have a community where the motto is blackout or back out, what could possibly go wrong? Then there's trying to sneak into the pay-to-play parties. You got that aspect too. You've got urination, but it's not really much of an issue because, as I pointed out last time around, climbing a fence with a full bladder is kind of a biomechanical impossibility of sorts. You've got the better view of the ocean and the sunsets and stuff. I get that, but do you really need to jump a fence to do that? There's a lot of aspects to this that do require a lot of thought. And I don't believe in, law enforcement running amok in Isla Vista, but I also don't believe in people running amok and causing a danger to themselves. But the worst danger they're causing to is their friends and family once they fall off that cliff. I'm sorry, but F is force is mass times acceleration. You hit the bottom of that cliff, you're going to feel it, and you might not live to tell about it. And if you do live to tell about it, it's going to lead to life-changing injuries. There's a video that I have on YouTube. It's called Fall Risk, the Dangers of Isla Vista's Cliffs and Bluff Tops. I highly recommend watching it. It explains the physics of the fall, how many victims we've had. We've actually had 15, I believe we're talking about, Director Topliff. We've had about 15, and that includes Jeff Jewell, who had that mysterious fall during 2020 on Campus Point. So that's one of the statistics that's on there. But again, I point out and I stress that 90% of the falls that occur are in fenced-in areas that have plenty of signage, from 65 block to 6700 block of Del Playa. That's 90% of the falls. So I suggest, you know, the one thing about the fencing that we're talking about, the 6-foot high fencing, I mentioned about the fencing behind 65, 13 or 15 through 19 Del Playa. I highly recommend that as a model to go after, and also the hostile horticulture. Anyway, that's my take on it, and thank you for your time, guys.
Thank you for those comments. This row of tables is for board directors. Do you want me to give you a seat to join with the public?
I do believe that I represent the public, civilians. Therefore, I just came in. I don't know why it's such a big deal that I would have to arouse such issues to where it would be pointed out as if it's something off kilter.
It's not a big issue, so why don't you just sit in the audience with the other members of the
So
public?
why is it a big issue that I'm even sat here when there's supposed to be a guest that hasn't arrived except myself?
This set of
We can't
tables
hear.
is for elected folks and appointed
Who
folks.
did you think was going to arrive here today?
I
We
knew
have
that no
another
one
board
was
member who's
arriving
going to be
there.
arriving momentarily.
Okay, when that person gets here, I already let him know that I would move. And we had an agreement, a personal agreement. I mean, I looked you in your eye and I
I'm
said,
asking
I'll
you
move.
please to join with the public.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Ann Renault. I'm a long-term resident. My husband and I, Ken, we're homeowners. We also have rental property here. What I'm hearing is that you're dealing with the result, but I'm not really sure what caused these people to go over the fence, you know, and so from my vantage point, dealing with it before it happens, you know, as a root cause. I mean, were they inebriated? You know, was there some mitigating factor here? Were they disorientated? I mean, really, what was going on that, you know, motivated them apparently to go over a fence, not go over, you know, the further end of Isla Vista, you know, which is unfenced. So I really would appreciate clarification if we have that information.
Thank you for those comments. Yes. Ms.
Hi, my name is Valerie Sweat, and I am a longtime property manager in Isla Vista of 35 years. I'm sorry I did not read all of Laura Capp's proposal, but I wanted to answer the police stuff as curious. I turned to the police officer sitting behind me, and when you talk about quantity of police officers on duty, he says during the day there's one. Okay, I don't consider that way overstaffed. Friday nights in the fall, there's 8, but that's in the fall. As we all know, everybody gets a little excited coming back to school. But going back to the cliffs, I haven't lost a tenant in a number of years off of the Del Playa cliffs. We have done everything that was required by the county. In fact, I put up my fences 4 inches higher than what was required by the county, and I did them in wood because most of the students responded to wood and left it alone as opposed to chain link, which was really fun. 2 hours after we put it up, they cut it and rolled it back. 2 hours. That was the length of time. I am concerned over the 2 comments that I heard here with plexiglass and cactus. I have watched them dismantle most everything I have ever done in 35 years to try and slow down damage to the property, damage to the cliffs, people going over, and everything else. I would be concerned with the cactus, although I love the idea. There's somebody that's going to sue. And unfortunately, it's not going to be you guys here, it's going to be us. Because somebody's going to get it in the eye or in the ear or whatever else. And I love the idea. I just think there isn't, you get it too high and then they're gonna complain. They live on Del Playa because they want to see the ocean and they can't see
On
the
Zoom,
ocean.
and I'd like to get on your list for this item.
So I would like to see, again, I have not read Laura Caps's proposal, but I would like to see some additional ideas. And no matter what we say or do, they still will cut down plexiglass. They will put a board over the cactus. I watched it happen for too many years. The last young man who fell off the cliffs broke both legs, lost 2/4 of schooling because of that. And he was lucky he didn't die. That was the last one I had, and it's been a while. So I would please ask all of you to, and Laura Capps, to readdress this, and maybe we can find something else that's better, but so far I'm not fond of either one of those answers. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments.
Mr. President.
Yes.
While I'm sure I speak for the entire board and say that we appreciate all of the public comments, it is part of our rules and policies that public comments address the board and not other public speakers. So I just wanted to share that for everyone.
All right. Sorry. We had a public commenter on Zoom.
We have three. We have Grace Wilson, Mark Vucevic, and somebody named Moto Jeep here is the name of their phone.
Okay, if we could go to Grace first.
Hi, I just want to make sure everyone can hear me before I start.
Yes.
Good. Okay. Hi, my name is Grace Wilson. I'm a student at SBCC and I was a good friend of Benny Shermer. And right now I'm kind of working with a couple students and friends of the Shermers, and also I've been working closely with the associate students on some of this stuff. Basically, my main point about the 8-point plan is that, as we are all aware, the fencing, the matter of physically changing the infrastructure, is a long-term process, has to go through a lot of legalities in order to be passed. And I know that there have been efforts before and it hasn't gone through. And because that's a long-term thing, and because this is a urgent issue right now, as anyone could lose their life at any point right now with the dangers, it's important, I think, to bring attention towards what we can do, which is short-term action. I was informed about the solar lighting that was placed at Walter Capps Park and I think one other park a couple weeks ago. So I actually checked out that lighting, and I have a friend that took pictures for me, and the lighting is very minimal and there's maybe a couple, one was broken and just not sufficient in my opinion, because lighting is something that would be very helpful in my opinion. I'm a student who's attended Isla Vista a lot, and I've been present at a lot of band shows, and I wasn't even aware that the cliffs were as steep as they were just on private property, just because we couldn't see. So I think lighting would be a good change. I also agree with education outreach and also just advocating for the conversation. I think having help from the IVCSD to host community events, as many students, someone said like 15,000 students are in IV or at UCSB right now. Many are just literally not aware of this. I've lived in Santa Barbara for 5 years and I had never heard about a cliff death until losing my friend. So I think spreading awareness, holding community events, education outreach on social media, informing tenants, because as far as I'm aware, putting clip-on solar lights along private property, encouraging tenants to do so, would not be an issue because it's not adjusting anything, like for landlords. So yeah, that's my main point, is advocating for cliff safety, putting up solar lights, and then also just informing tenants and new IV residents and just like party goers that this is something that they can do something about. And then also I wanted to address the importance, I think, of putting the memorial up and putting funding towards that at Walter Capps Park, putting memorials for the 13 lives that were lost, because I think that would also be an impactful way to inform students. And that's something that we could put funding towards. So yeah, funding towards those two things and outreach and awareness would be vital.
All right, thank you for those comments. We will now go to Mark V on Zoom.
Good evening, IVCSD board. I wanted to make some comments. So based on my time in Isla Vista and as a UCSB student, I do want to just confirm that urination as a reason that people jump over the initial fencing. And I think that is something that I think should be addressed more structurally. And I appreciate the inclusion of public restrooms in this. I'd also wonder kind of publicly what the role of the Rec and Parks is in their role for having public restrooms at their park facilities, which are government owned, publicly owned facilities along Del Playa. I'd also like to echo that I think cactus and hostile foliage I think could be a potential partial solution. I think sensors that are movement sensors, not for the sake of turning on lights, but movement sensors for alerting landlords or property owners or even sheriff's deputies, not aimed towards the property, but aimed towards the ocean, I think could be incredibly valuable and an immediate tool. I'd also, just on a bare minimum level, the people who jump over these fences are making impulsive choices. And even fences that have the tops angled inward, angled so that it's just slightly harder to jump over, I think could be something that stops or misdirects than otherwise impulsive choice. I would also say that having someone jump over a fence is a just cause for shutting down a party. I would also say that including signage on all fencing saying, call the non-emergency foot patrol number is a good idea, because it could be someone who isn't falling off a cliff. It could be someone who is seriously considering taking their own life. That I think is also a reason to call someone. And then lastly, I would actually really echo or introduce the idea of a secondary fence, a fence that's attached from the outside of the cliffside that can be the barrier of last resort for someone who does manage to climb over and just falls. And I think that's where this comes down to is, thinking of this as a multi-pronged effort and multi-factor answers. That's my response. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Now we'll go to Moto G on Zoom. Is there a user under the name Moto G on Zoom?
They're there. They're just not unmuting now.
Could you ask them to unmute?
I did. They're not unmuting.
Okay. Is there anyone else?
Yeah, I want to talk. How do I get unmuted on your stupid system?
Okay, we can now hear you, and please speak, and please share your name with us.
I'm Bruce Murdoch. I'm a 53-year resident. I live in Rio Del Mar, which is the R1 subdivision on the west end of Isla Vista. First of all, there's an upper limit to intelligence. There's no lower limit to stupidity. And so if you want to do stupid things, like go around a fence, step on a cliff that is not stable, especially at night where you can't see it, that's called Darwin. I mean, you can't regulate stupidity. Lighting. We already have too much lighting, and more lighting just obscures the night sky. I'm an astronomer, and I really don't like it. History. In the R1 area where I live, nobody in my 53 years here has fallen off the cliff and with injuries. There are some people that have tumbled down the cliff. I've seen them, but they didn't do it intentionally. In fact, it was during the daytime, I being one of them. You talk about making the property owners in R1 or in IV, which includes R1, having to put up stuff on the fence. Maybe you are not aware that all the properties in R1 do not go to the mean high tide line. They don't even go to the bluff. They end at a strip that goes along the bluff called El Descansadero that is owned in undivided portion amongst all the 92 people that live in our properties that are in R1. So if you want to impose fencing or lighting or any other thing on the, the bluff down here, you're gonna have to get the approval of 92 people, or at least 51% of 92 people, which I don't think is gonna happen. So those are my points. I think that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And down here, it ain't broke. We haven't had people falling off a cliff. And I like my unobscured view of the ocean. That's all I have to say.
All right, thank you for those comments. Are there any other public comments this time?
There's one more on Zoom.
It must be my turn.
Who's the last person on Zoom?
No, Lenny.
Okay, may no Lenny please speak.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, my name's Nolani Henson. I'm a student at UCSD, a resident in Isla Vista. And Benny Shermer was one of my very close childhood friends. I've been working with Grace, talking about like ideas about the fencing. And one thing that we've really noticed is that the fences are incredibly inviting to sit on and super easy to climb over, because a lot of the wooden fences, the top is a 2x4, which is very thick, and people love to sit on them. I've seen people sitting on them at multiple parties on DP. So when I was on the ILP building recently at UCSB, I've noticed that all of the fences on the second, third, and fourth stories are, instead of it being like this, it's a very sharp angle that makes it impossible to sit on and very, very uncomfortable to climb over. And I was just thinking that in terms of like short-term action, that could also be something that could very easily be implemented to changing the fencing laws that won't be too invasive to the homeowners that don't want to obstruct the views.
Thank you for those comments.
Okay, I'm Sue Dixon. I've been a very long-term resident of Isla Vista, way out near Bruce Murdoch, who just spoke. I will say I'm in support of safety, the bluffs, but I have a lot of hesitation about the plan as presented. First of all, how about we call, instead of fencing, say barriers, and that could include horticulture, anything that will keep people from advancing too far over the cliff. Janet kindly took me for a tour today of some native vegetation that would effectively provides a barrier at the edge of the cliff out right across the street from where I live. And there were things called what, lemon berry, see if I can pass this test, quail bush, and oh shoot, I forgot the last.
There's the sunflower.
Yeah, anyway, they're beautiful. They're not as prickly as the cactus. They're native, and then you avoid the problem of putting in fence posts, which actually cause the cliff to erode more quickly, which is very important for all of us. So I'm really not comfortable with the idea of a 6-foot fence. I would never in my life be able to see over it, and most of us wouldn't. I think the unsurpassed, Laura Capps used the term unsurpassed views right here in her document. That's what we have, but they're not unsurpassed if you put a fence between us. I do think you could see over the whole horticulture. Now, if property owners down on the party end want to put fencing right in front of their property, I don't have a problem with that. But I think it's not a one size fits all. I think the 6800 block is a totally different environment and factors than the 6600 block. And I think open space is a very different animal than places with buildings on them. I think we should not obstruct the open not space views. So that's pretty much covers what I think about barriers. I'm in favor of motion sensor lighting, not something that's gonna be like more street lights, because I hate the ones we've already got. Completely in agreement with Bruce Murdoch on that one. I think the outhouses are a good idea and education is a good idea. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Yes.
Good evening, everybody. While I reluctantly do not have anything prepared to say, I do want to say that thank you so much for having me and letting me speak here. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Eric Carlson. I am an off-campus senator of ASUCSB. I serve as a pro temp for the Senate. I would like to, I respect the board of directors rules about not addressing the audience, but I would like to echo many of the things that were said, and that, but also to kind of infuse my own take in that I know that there were topics of over-policing that brought up, but I want to bring up the fact that it is not about shutting down what a lot of the law enforcement and the peace officers and all of these really amazing humanitarian individuals do and the work that they do. It's about making sure that the resources that we allocate are going into places that they can be used the most. And that, in my opinion, may be horticulture. It may be fencing, it may not be fencing, but I speak my truth, and I believe that it is not law enforcement, where those resources can most properly be spent, most appropriately be spent. And instead, by working together with the landlords, working together with students, that, as I have heard echoed in this room, that students will disregard certain things if you put them in place, if they find them unfavorable, and trying to find out how to build a process that keeps people safe, that's built on a mutual respect, one, for the landlord's property, and two, for the students' interests that keep them here, that keep them at the schools, that keep them happy, that keep them sane, that keep them socializing with their friends, and all of these different arenas that we have to compete with in our lives. And so I find it very important to make sure that the resources that we ultimately end up allocating and the choices that the board here, that the county supervisor's office, that they end up choosing to pursue, the route that they choose to go down, that it is amenable to all parties involved, and that it makes sure that, again, that the end process that everything is built on respect, right? That it is built on the fact that we won't take down your property while we live in it, for example. And at the same time, perhaps pursuing different options for the landlords, something about the word appropriate buildings that was brought up. That actually rang true, is that perhaps places where students have had the most falls, that perhaps maybe things like maybe spikes, not shooting from the hip there. I don't know if you'll find legal problems down the line there. But again, like if you sold them off as like preventing like bird droppings on the passerbys below or something, right? That perhaps it could be more amenable to the students and landlords as well, to make sure everybody is safe and happy and most of all respectful. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments.
Quick add-on, very quick.
Okay, if it's quick.
Yeah, Valerie Sweat again. You mentioned something about horticulture, and sorry, I did again, habit, I speak to the people. But she did mention something about horticultural and plants. And I was just thinking, and I didn't hear it be real clear, but how about growing a hedge that is maybe 4 or 5 feet across and 5 feet high? They can't get through the hedge and they can't get over the hedge, and it's green, and it, I mean, as a manager, I would be willing to have my gardener trim that. And that could be, if somebody can do some kind of investigation and get more information on that, but that could be a possible answer that covers a multitude of people in this room. Anyway,
so
it was quick.
bringing in women scantily clad, walking around like
Excuse me,
Amazonians.
Miss. I did not call on you to speak. You already shared your public comments that you didn't want to get up and join the rest of the public. I would call on you.
Public, for the people, by the people.
You are not sitting with the public. I asked you if you wanted to sit with the public.
Does anybody else
have any interest in what I have to say?
Not while you're sitting there.
Sorry.
Well, I will go on anyway.
No, please.
There is
So
a
the board would need to take an
and
action
utter
to ask her to be formally removed
tyrannical,
if you want to do
treacherous
that.
operation going on.
Recess the meeting.
Where children are
Okay,
being brought
excuse
in
me,
there
everyone.
and
We will be
being
taking a
given designer
brief
drugs
recess
to
for
have
5
sex
minutes. Thank you.
on camera.
Recording stopped.
Yep. That's what I do. Well, online people, there are literally school buses
It's muted
bringing in
online.
women and men to have
Oh, dear.
Recording in progress.
All right, I'd like to reconvene this meeting, everyone, at 7:03 p.m. Before we get back to our discussion item, I just want to say that I'm sorry that that took so much time. I'm sorry that we had this kind of disruption. I asked the woman to leave or to be more calm or to join the public multiple times. I had a conversation with the officer and her as well, and she refused until she decided that she wanted to leave. I made the decision that we could not progress the meeting. We could not have a fruitful conversation when people were being interrupted. People were laughing at other folks' comments, and I didn't want it to devolve into disharmony and hurt feelings. I want everyone to be able to share their piece, so that's why I made that decision. So thank you for bearing with us. So we were in the middle of our first item, which is a very important topic, and we heard lots of comments from the public. I want to make sure that everyone in the public has had the chance to speak on Supervisor Cap's 8-point plan.
I don't think we have any more public comment on Zoom.
All right, I see no further public comments, so I will go back to the board.
Oh, there's one more. Sorry, he just raised his hand.
Okay.
John's iPhone 14.
Okay, if John's iPhone could please share your full name and share your comment with us.
Yeah, hi, this is John Trent. Thank you guys so much for having me on at the last minute. I apologize that I showed up a little late. I just wanted to comment on the work that you guys are doing, and and I'm a friend of the family. I knew Benny for over 10 years. His son and my son were best friends growing up. Obviously, in doing the research on these tragedies that happen along this cliff, it's not a one-time incident, and we all know that doing nothing is just not an option going forward. There's obviously something is not right with these cliffs. With climate change, it's just progressively getting worse. I know that the homes along that bluff there are consistently being monitored, and I know that they're looking for safety issues. I think that as we look at these safety precautions, enforcement of parties along those patios, I think is very important. I understand fence height is a contentious issue with everyone because nobody wants to have their views impeded. However, I feel like a higher fence is necessary in these cases. I don't know necessarily about a 6-foot height fence, but something along a higher fence, just indicating to anybody visiting those patios that this is just not a safe place. Just also note, all of these accidents happened at night. All of these accidents happened on Friday and Saturday. All of these accidents happened as a result of a party. So if we had some sort of enforcement on Friday and Saturday night between the hours of 10 and 1:30 a.m., I think this would put an end to a lot of these accidents that are happening along these cliffs. So just keep that in mind as you go forward. And just know that the work that you guys are doing will save lives. That is a fact. And if nothing is done, something much worse could happen. A party on a patio could collapse. 20 kids could be down on the beach. Who knows? So again, nothing is just not an option. Thank you so much.
Thank you for those comments, Mr. Trent. So I see no further public comment on this item. So I want to open this item up for board discussion and board commentary. I'm really thankful that we did have so many public commenters on this issue. I've constantly been asking that we have greater public engagement. I'm a little bit bummed that it takes such a intense and personal topic to bring everyone out, but I'm glad that the community is here. I want to share some comments of my own, having lived on 6-8 now for a long time and understanding the idea around views and wrestling mentally with a few friends and neighbors who wanted me to understand their perspective. Earlier last week, when we knew that we were going to be discussing endorsement of this plan, discussing support of this plan. I had a number of friends who are not here today and don't want to speak for different reasons, but who came to me with their concerns, and I felt real reactive with them and wanting to be right as a leader. But I know that one solution is not the right solution, and it's taken a small amount of growth for me to understand that. When I look at the plan, I support the vast majority of the titles. I support fencing, I support lighting, I support bathrooms and warning signs, education, horticulture, and a memorial. And I believe that enforcement is a useful tool in order to protect our community. And I'm glad that there is a portion here on alcohol and drug considerations. The main topic that friends wanted to speak to me about, and these are Isla Vista residents, and some of them are not my dear friends, but they are folks that I've shared space with for years, wanted me to be very clear on where fencing begins and ends. And there was a lot of neighbors on 6-8 who want to protect the views, and we heard those comments today. So as a director, I will be supporting this plan in the overall. I will be asking for amendments to be clear on where the fences begin and end. I want to protect the coastal views where there is not current development of fencing, where there might need to be more barriers, as we heard a commenter share. I do support horticulture. I went on a walk with one of our neighbors, Ms. Stitch, and another neighbor, Mr. Hubbard, and they talked to me about lemonade berry and coyote bush and the California sunflower. And all of these plants are in fact gentle to the touch. They're all California natives and Santa Barbara natives that require minimal maintenance, minimal trimming, and very minimal water. And they have protected the area of West Campus open space. That's a place that I frequent a lot. And the idea that we have not had the number of accidents or injuries happen in the West Campus open space versus in the party area is what's made me support the idea of only fencing where it is most useful, only fencing in the areas where it is most problematic, but also to understand that certain parts of Del Playa can't handle more infrastructure. Part of my comments are that some of these homes are already far too unsafe to be fixed with a fence or a bush or with lighting. They already overhang, and the reason why they are still rented to is for pure profit. We're putting neighbors at risk just to rent another house. That is not something I support. And we won't be able to fix that problem as a board who supports a plan. And a county supervisor on their own cannot fix a problem with a home that should be condemned. So those are my initial comments. I want to hear from other directors. I don't want to take up too much space. Director Brand.
Thank you, President Aguilar. I too want to voice my support for the plan's concept. I think that I agree with everything you've said about the 8 points. They all have value. They are not any one of them the end all be all of how we're going to improve safety. They all play a role, whether it is the downlighting on the fences, whether it's more signage, whether it is higher fences on properties, whether it's the horticulture that creates separation between the edge of the face of the bluff and the walking trail. To me, the fencing is something that has always struck me as like, why can't we do this? Why don't we already have this? Because I go to other coastal communities and I see where they have these high plexiglass fences. And I know that in the past, I just want to give voice to the fact this isn't the first time that there's been an attempt to do this. There have been attempts in the past to try to allow for this, but they have been stymied by the California Coastal Commission. And I want to give Supervisor Capps credit because she's bringing this forward with the full knowledge that it will be a tough lift, but that in order for us to get there, we need to put our cards on the table and make the changes and really dare the commission to prioritize people's lives, because that's what we're talking about. This is really personal for me. A classmate of mine who had graduated UCSD and came back to Isla Vista to visit his friends last year, fell off a cliff at a house that he frequented a lot when he was in college. He knew that house well. And when he stepped over the fence, which he was able to do because the fence was not high enough, he thought that he was stepping onto a solid ground, but because of the erosion that had occurred, he was stepping onto just a tile that was hanging there. I got the chance to speak with his mom, which she said something to me that I think was really powerful and that we all need to hear, which is that in the past, a lot of the conversation about this, without meaning to be, has been very blaming of the victims. I went through a quick census of the headlines from years past. They talk about booze-fueled rages and co-eds at spring break. And without meaning to, this does put blame on people that are in situations that should not be dangerous. We are not the only campus side community where students drink alcohol, but we are the only one where people die at the rate that they are from these sorts of accidents. So we got to ask ourselves how we can change that. And this plan to me puts forward a variety of different measures to do that. And I think the last thing that I'll just add is I agree with Director Aguilar that to me, the intention of the fencing, which is an important piece of this, has always been for the properties that are already subject to the bluff policy with the monitoring and potential cutbacks once they get within the 15-foot range. The intention of this is not for open space. Open space can be handled with horticulture, and I really appreciate Janet for taking us on a walk along to look at the different types of native plants that could be used to do that, because in a lot of places, you really just do need separation to keep people away from the bluffs. In just in conclusion, I appreciate all the engagement. I think it's important. And I think that the more that we can all try to come together as a community with compassion for those that we've lost, the more that we are going to turn the page, because, you know, whatever has been done in the past wasn't working. It wasn't. People are still dying. And I also just want to say a big thank you to the friends and family of Benny, who I did not know personally, but I feel like I know because of through you and through all the comments that we've received from his friends and family. I know that it is really hard during this time. The fact that you have figured out a way to put your energy into the advocacy, to me, is really admirable. And I believe that it does your loved one justice. And I hope that he will be the last one, the last time that we have to have this discussion.
Thank you, Director Brandt. Are there any other directors who wish to share comments?
I guess go ahead. I also wanted to express appreciation for all of the input that we've gotten and the way that the community has really rallied around this issue. I think it's great that Supervisor Capps has put so much attention to it and is so concerned about these issues. My only concern would just be the rush to a solution that is one size fits all, and I don't think it will be a one size fits all situation. And so I just think that we shouldn't move too fast or make new rules that don't perhaps suit us well.
Thank you for those comments. Schultz.
I'd like to echo that. I'm really, really proud to see how much of the community has come out to speak to us this evening, given that it is such an important topic. As previous directors have said, I love the idea of horticulture. I think it's fantastic. I think it's going to work really well. I also do think that fencing is going to be important for certain areas of Isla Vista. It, as once again we've said before, it is not a one size fits all.
On that note, especially with what our president has said, I do believe that there are sections of this plan that need some further clarification. I think we need some further clarification on what's going to happen with the fence situation. And personally, I'm unclear about what point 8 is specifically referring to. So I would love some further clarification on that point, but I'm really, really glad that the community has come out and is working to find solutions for a problem that is very unique to Isla Vista.
Yeah, like similar, like other directors have said, I find myself more in favor of the use of hostile horticulture, which doesn't just include cactus, but it more often includes those large hedges that you're not really able to climb. I do see the benefit of using fences, especially along properties that are already put up. But I definitely want to echo what President Aguilar has said around continuing to, have people live in properties that are subject to erosion and the safety hazards that proposes altogether. I think that, taking a step back from the bluff altogether and decommissioning those properties is like the long-term solution that we are approaching as climate change continues to erode our bluff structures. But if they are going to continue, I think fencing is a useful tool. I want us to think critically about the kind of fences that we are encouraging people to put up. 6 foot is very high. And no matter if it's plexiglass or, like the large metal chain link fences with the overturned tops, that is really affecting the interactions that we have between our environment. And I think that's something that we should all be aware of before we, erect huge fences. In addition, I think that the implementation of horticulture, especially along open spaces, is a great opportunity for us to engage with local indigenous peoples about how they have prevented bluff erosion in the long term and incorporating as many native plants as possible, like coyote bush. It's a great one. And then also my last point is on point 8 of the plan. Like other directors, I would like to echo the need for clarification of what this means. And whether we want to see it in Isla Vista or not, the U.S. policing system is definitely one that fosters some inequity within our communities. And I want to be really careful that we're not continuing to pervade this within our communities.
Thank you for those comments. Are there any other board comments? Dr. Deschler.
So I also want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. It's so great to actually talk to people in a room as opposed to just being on Zoom. So I really appreciate that you all came out and offered your views coming from as your property owners or students or friends of people who have died on the cliffs. I thank you for that. I think that I want to also just say I appreciate that Supervisor Capps has worked with IVCSD on this 8-point plan and has developed this plan with a lot of the ideas that this board has been talking about for a long time. So I think that our board has had input into this, but I do think that in many ways, this is an aspirational plan that's been developed quickly. And so I hope that as we get closer to November, that there will be some more flushing out of some of these ideas so that there's more information on height requirements, fencing, horticulture ideas. I think all that's really important to have just a little bit more meat on this. And I do hope for the people that have offered input that you are reaching out to Supervisor Capps' office. I mean, I'm sure that you all know that in many ways, the IVCSD is just like you. The board gives input to the county, but it's the county that enacts policies that affect the cliffs. So it's important that you share your views directly with the county in anticipation of November 4th. I will say a couple things. One is I'm not going to repeat some of the things that you all have already said, because I think some of my colleagues have made some really good points. But one thing that I don't see in here that I would really appreciate if it was flushed out, and that is the bluff policy. One of the things that we heard when Supervisor Capps was at our last meeting is while there is a bluff policy, there are annual inspections of properties that perhaps those annual inspections need to happen sooner, or they went more regularly, and that there are an absence of qualified people that are doing those inspections. And so sometimes that delays these inspections. So I think that's important. And another thing that we heard from one of the speakers was that or from somebody is that when the inspections are going on, that the inspections are looking at some of the patios and that kind of thing for optimal of number of people and not actual amount of people. So I just think that there's more that can be looked at in terms of the planning and development side, or maybe that's actually building and safety, the building and safety side, to look at these properties to make sure that those county agencies are being proactive in what they can do with the properties that are eroding. So I wanted to say that. And then also, I think it's interesting when we look at number 8, when we talk about enforcement, everyone assumes enforcement is the sheriff's office. And I think of the enforcement as also the fire department. And a fire department is enforcing occupancy. So I think it's important that we realize that there's different aspects of enforcement. Enforcement is sheriff's department, it's the fire department, it's building and safety. So perhaps there can be some more information that can, for November 4th, that we can understand a little bit about what enforcement looks like. So in all, I really appreciate the leadership of Supervisor Capps in taking on this issue quickly and at a really difficult time for our community. It is the saddest thing when somebody dies falling off our cliffs here. It is absolutely the saddest thing. And the worst thing is that if we ignore this and don't do anything. So I appreciate the leadership of this board and also the supervisor in the county and others. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. I'm wondering if there's any board responses. I feel like we all kind of shared similar ideas. It seems, and I'm going to look for head nods from everyone, that we in general endorse the 8 points of the plan. There are points that we want further clarification on, specifically fencing and enforcement. Is there a third point that I'm missing that we want deeper clarification on?
Maybe lighting as well.
Lighting as well. Okay.
I think Christian raised
Yeah.
a good point about.
I would like to see the bluff policy incorporated in this. I think it's really integral to this issue.
Got it. And staff, is it more helpful if we were to take a motion on this, or to have this be as recommendation that you shared some information with the supervisor?
I mean, I can share that information on my own, but I can't say you endorse the plan without your vote.
Got it. Understood. Is there a motion from any directors at this time?
I'll give it a try. Just giving a synopsis of what I've heard is that I move to endorse the plan and ask for more clarification on what the enforcement aspect looks like.
Is that your motion?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
I would
sorry,
like to
go ahead.
amend your motion.
Okay.
I would like to amend your motion to ask for the bluff policy to be added to this 8-point plan.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. You did a good job.
I will substitute motion item to move that we endorse the plan with a request that looking at the bluff policy for changes be added, and to ask for more clarification on what point 8 enforcement looks like.
Yeah, I would like to amend that to also seek like more.
Jamie.
I want the clarification on the first point on fencing, more specifically for members of the public who might not be here, who might look at the bluff plan and only look at the bullet points. And I don't want neighbors who are not here or who are just don't have our ear to misunderstand the plan, because I do understand the plan in my position, but not everyone has that position. So I would amend that motion to say that we endorse the 8-point plan with clarification on fencing, where fencing begins and ends, as well as the height requirements for fencing, which properties will have fencing and which properties will have horticulture, to include a point on the bluff management policy, and to seek more clear clarification on enforcement to include other agencies beyond law enforcement.
Can I substitute back you with, we're gonna, so we've got fencing, enforcement, and block policy. Block policy and enforcement, I agree with what you just said. For the fencing, I think that we should just say what we want and what it sounds like the community wants to me from a majoritarian perspective, which is that the 6 feet requirement be for the properties that are already subject to the existing block policy, which is most, if not all, of the properties between 6'5" and 6'8" block, or end of 6'7" block, and that the properties that are not subject to that policy would be prime candidates for horticulture.
I support that adjustment.
Well done.
Okay, before we continue, so we've had a lot of substitute motions and amendments. So if we want to consider Director Brandt's substitute motion, we have to have a vote from the board to consider it.
How about I'm just gonna withdraw my motion, so you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go through that procedure. And then
Okay, so now we have President Aguilar's amended motion for a vote, which does not include Director Brandt's amendments.
There was no second on any of these motions, though, so far.
Right, so that's the motion that's on the table. We do need a second on that, if that is going to be considered.
Why don't you just delete all the motions?
Yeah, I say folks want to delete those motions. I'm good with deleting my motion.
Okay,
And
all motions withdrawn.
all motions are currently withdrawn.
Okay.
Now I will make the motion that we endorse the 8-point plan, that we endorse fencing on the properties that are already subject to the existing county bluff policy, and that we endorse horticulture on the properties that are not subject to the bluff policy. That we ask for clarification on what enforcement looks like, and that we ask for there to be a 9th point around adjustments to the bluff building policy. Sorry, that was a mouthful.
Glad you said it.
Okay. Is that a useful motion for staff? Is that a useful sentence?
Sure.
And you will second?
I'll second.
Okay, so hearing that second, is there any public comment on this motion? Yes, Ms. Stitch.
Thank you very much. I would just want to point out with the wording that all of Isla Vista is subject to the county bluff policy. So when you're saying that, I think you're envisioning certain blocks, but it's really the entire length of the bluff. All the open space, all the houses on the entire bluff are subject to that. So when you're saying that, I don't think it's exactly what you mean to be saying. Do you understand?
I'm not sure I agree, but I think I have a more of a substitute.
Because I know
Yes.
that everybody in the 6800 block, and I'm sure the county and the IVRPD, they measure the bluff, and we are under that policy.
So my adjustment for tying that to the bluff policy is tying it to areas where there is an existing park or pathway separating bluff and private properties.
What does that do? I don't understand.
So the reason I thought that you weren't subject to the property is because your property line doesn't go out to the bluff.
But the property in front is subject to it. So in other words, that is owned by multiple agents, people, but it's still subject to the policy.
Yes.
I'm not sure that's correct. The way I'm reading the bluff policy right now, it's for building foundations
Right.
within 20 feet of the bluff. So
Yeah.
if there's no building foundation, I assume the land would not be subject to it.
Yeah.
So it's for building foundations, not just any land within the bluff. Because then, yes, you're right. If it was for all the land, then it would be for all the land, but it's for 20 feet, 10 feet, and 15 feet from the bluff, but building foundations.
Yeah.
A park wouldn't be under this.
Yes, Ms. Sudar.
Maybe the wording is the area to the west of existing, the area to the west of Arroyo del Mar, that has no fencing is excluded somehow from a requirement of 6-foot fence. I don't know. I think that's what the neighbors are looking for. I think the neighbors of the 6800 block and stuff are looking for, where there isn't a fence when it stops at Sea Lookout Park, that's where it stops. So once you hit Arroyo del Mar, because that's where that is not, we need clarification on that.
All right, thank you for that, Ms. Dixon.
Actually, I'm not comfortable with just 6800 because there's big open spaces on the 6700 block as well.
And so can you clarify what you're wanting? You don't want there to be.
There's an appropriate where it's larger fencing is appropriate.
Okay, I hear your comment.
Where there's a view is
Yes,
how I would define it.
okay. Ms. Sweat.
Oh, you remember. Thank you. I have a question for, is it
Kirsten.
Deschler?
Yes,
I can't quite read that.
that's
part.
okay.
You talked about the bluff policy. I went through this in 2005 and I need to know if it's changed. They sent representatives from the county out on the beach to look up at the bluffs because they did it in April because it was after the winter storms. And the county personnel, I don't recall what their jobs were within the county, but they made a determination of additional erosion of the cliffs and if there needed to be some further investigation. And they notified the landlords, I was notified to do a geological survey and testing. And we had to pay for that in order to determine what the status of the bedrock was, how far down it was, et cetera, et cetera. Is that how they still do it?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That was 2005, a long time ago.
It
Yeah.
might be different than now because it got updated in 2020.
Okay. Yeah. What, could you tell me what the difference is in the updating
I
from
wouldn't
what I
want to
just said?
speak ignorantly, so no, I don't know. I don't work for the county, so
You don't?
no.
Okay,
I'm just teasing.
Director Brand.
Well, I was just gonna say, for the sake of simplicity, I think Peggy's wording makes sense to me. I was trying to find a principle that didn't look like we were privileging a certain group of people that was tied more towards the principle at hand. But in practicality, I think you are correct about that. And the thing that I struggle with when it comes to other open space and parks that are between 6.5 and 6.7 block is that all of them already have existing fencing. And while there was someone who spoke in public comments tonight that said that everyone that's fallen has been there, there have been people that have fallen at the end of 6.7 block and beginning of 6.8 block. In fact, there was someone named Sierra Markey Winkler who fell in 2013. And so I want to be sensitive to the fact that, like, what we are talking about is still potentially saving people's lives, and it's not hypothetical. And those are difficult things that we have to weigh. But I also think that part of the plan is that the fencing would be aesthetically pleasing, that it would be plexiglass see-through so as not to obstruct views, something that is coherent with our community's character.
Okay, Ms. Ria.
So from the research that I've done, there's 5,000 feet of fencing or fenced area stretching from the easternmost part behind Manzanita Village to Sea Lookout Park. Of that 5,000 feet, 1,000 of it is UCSB, which is behind Manzanita Village. About approximately 700 odd feet or so, almost 1,000, is IVRPD County Parks, which is Sea Lookout, Pelican, Walter Caps, Rodapel, those parks along the way there. And the rest, 4,000 feet of it is private property. So maybe, I think where the 6-foot fencing would probably be the most efficient or effective would be behind the residential housing. As I pointed out, that one apartment, those three units, 65, 15, 17, and 19, Del Playa, they have a very effective fence. It's kind of like a cage back from Monkey Jungle in Miami. But hey, but anyway, another thing too I got to point out is that first of all, Sierra Marquis Wingwood was a friend of mine. She was a close friend, and she passed away in 2014. I remember waking up to that news, and that hit me like a ton of bricks, man. I mean, it was tough. Kim and I were devastated by that. She was a close personal friend. That happened in 2014 at Sea Lookout Park. And from the research that I've done, only 2 falls have occurred from Sea Lookout Park. Like I said, of the 40 falls that I've recorded, 42, including 1996 to 1999, like I say, 90% occurred in 65, 66, and 6700 blocks of Del Playa. It doesn't exclude 68, right? You're having a couple falls. If you look at the numbers, there's something going on there. There's definitely something going on. Numbers don't lie. I'm not going to use statistics. I'm going to use sheer numbers. And that's 40 falls, and 23, no more than 23, I'm sorry. 38 of them. Actually, no, I take that back. But let's just look at the falls around that area. 90% have occurred in that fenced-in area, the residential areas. And that's something that speaks volumes in itself. So it's something to consider in this planning. As far as the parks go, you don't get many falls, but I could see some improvement in the fencing. You definitely see that.
All right, thank you for those comments. So I've let this conversation kind of go in different directions, and we need to take action on a motion or withdraw the current motion, but we need to, as a board, I believe, come to a motion so we can be useful to the supervisor and be useful to the county, and then we can represent Isla Vista. And so us board members need to make a more clear motion. Are there any?
Sorry. Was that very audible, my side?
I appreciate Director Brandt trying as hard as I'm failed as well to make a useful motion at this point. Yes, Director Brandt.
Did Counselor, one of our staff, get the last one?
I do, I have. Okay, so I have the motion on the floor right now as endorse the 8-point plan with clarifications to properties within the existing bluff plan, including tying those areas to existing park and pathways, clarifications to the horticulture, and for those exempt from the plan, enforcement clarification. So that is the motion that's
awful.
Yeah. What do you guys want to do? How about you say what you want and we can try to write something?
Can I give
Please,
a
yes.
Recommended motion?
Yes.
Yes. Help us.
Oh, yes, thank you. Okay. Civil to the rescue. Okay,
I don't
so.
have everything.
Okay, so the motion will be to endorse overall generally the 8-point plan. Endorse fencing on properties that will be exempt or added from the existing plan. Endorse horticulture for those properties that will be exempt or added from the existing plan. Ask for clarification on what fencing looks like and ask for adjustments to clarification for what enforcement would look like and ask for adjustments to the block building policy.
I mean, you guys need to say what you want and then we'll try to write something. Like, do you want, I'm not, is this accurate or?
I mean, could we not just say that we think there are like multiple approaches and it should be evaluated based on the location in Isla Vista? Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be like case by case basis, but.
Or could you look at individual properties one at a time and make a decision?
Can I try one more time?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to go slow. So I would move that we endorse the 8-point plan. That we ask for clarification on the fencing point to clarify that the 6-foot requirement only applies to properties on the 6,500 through 6,700 block. And that horticulture is recommended for properties on the 6,800 block. And that the plan include amendments to the bluff building policy. And that the board receives clarification on the specific details of point 8 about enforcement. That's
easy to understand.
I think I just talked.
I don't know if that's
Sorry,
what you want,
and
but it's easy to
I really want to
understand.
thank the three of you for wrestling with us because we shoot from the hip sometimes.
Can I just ask you, Spencer, when you're talking about the 6-foot mandatory height of the fence only applying to that area, is it that area where there are existing fences?
Yes.
So do we need to specify that, or is there nothing there that doesn't have an existing fence?
It all has fences.
So if they're all existing.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, so we have the motion by Director Brandt and we have the second by Director Topliff. Is there any public comment on this motion? Yes.
What I'm hearing is that I hang up with the word fencing, and I heard the proposal earlier for barriers. I think if you say that you propose barriers for the entire Bluff-Top region, and then specifically say traditional fencing or whatever, however you want to phrase it, for specific areas that already exist, and horticultural features for open space in the 6,800 block, that defines and distinguishes the two areas.
Thank you for those comments. Are you?
I like that, but I'm scared.
I think that the motion as currently presented asks the more specific questions that neighbors are going to ask, even if we were to change the word to barriers and not ask those questions. I think it merely moves the question to a different week. And I don't think that that will benefit our residents here. I want to take action on this motion as president. I also believe that this motion asks the real specific questions that we heard today. Are there board members who want to comment on the motion as currently stated? All right, I see no further comments, so I will call for a vote on this motion. So all directors who are in favor of this motion, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say no. And this motion passes 6-0-0-1. Thank you, everyone, for your input and your patience with us. Thank you to our staff for being very patient with us. At this point, we will will move on to our second item, the revised festival ordinance.
All right, we have a presentation from Lieutenant Tesla, and it's for both 4.2 and 4.3.
Yes, please.
Well, I don't know. Oh my gosh.
Who do I call to get this guy?
Oh my God, that's too damn funny.
And thank you all for handling this. You all did.
Yeah.
Highly commendable. Thank you guys.
How you doing, John? You
Okay,
Need a
so I want to start, I'm not gonna address the entirety of the discussion I just had, but the timing of this is probably, couldn't be better in terms of bringing this to the CSD, because what I'm sharing with you today is part of that 8-point plan. I also like the fact, this is completely coincidental, but I like the fact that we're number 8. We're the last number in that whole plan, because this is not a problem that can be solved just by law enforcement or enforcement in general by the fire department, like you mentioned, or anyone else. We are part of the solution. We are not the solution. And so these changes that we're proposing to the festival and the social host ordinances go a long way towards contributing to the solution, but we are not the only thing. I want to really emphasize that before I even begin. And the truth is, especially, with the most recent tragedy that, and I'm very sensitive to the dynamics and the issues of policing in Isla Vista and its unique community, and just historically what Isla Vista and policing and that relationship has been. But yet, without fail, when a tragedy occurs, the public looks to us for answers and asks us, what are you doing to keep the public safe? And so, as I've said in these meetings before, my view is that we are not just law enforcement, we are public safety. And so this approach and these proposed festival changes go a long way, I think, towards modernizing some laws that are convoluted, confusing, and miss the point at times, to be quite honest. And so if I can ask Jonathan to move to the next slide. Coming out of the Ivy Safe meeting, that was most recently, we created a working group to look at the festival ordinance and social host ordinance. And we did that because the festival host, sorry, I'm gonna mix these up. The festival ordinance, the outdoor festival ordinance lapsed in 2023 at Deltopia. So we retained the ability to have the noise curfew at Halloween, but as of this year, it's no longer valid for Deltopia. We saw how significant Deltopia was this past year, and in the noise curfew, as you might call it, or the outdoor festival permit, is one of the most key ingredients to keeping that party from getting completely out of control. And we did a lot of compliance with the requirement for the outdoor festival permits during Halloween and Deltopia, and it's obviously something we want to extend. So it prompted this need to review it anyway. And in the same time, we are seeing an increase in the paid parties that are out here, the commercialization of residential properties, the damage to residential properties. We're seeing an influx of crime from people who are coming in from out of the area, who are participating in these concerts or these parties, and then leaving. Whole host of selling alcohol at these residential parties. So it's an opportunity to solve a lot of problems in one position. So we started this working group out of IV Safe. I was very happy to have 3 members of IVCSD there, Olivia and Ella. We were joined by Jonathan to represent IVCSD. And I just also love the fact that Olivia and Ella are both students. So there's that voice that was shared during our discussions there. Asaze from Associated Students was involved in this very deeply from the beginning. Sutar representing IVRPD and also our long-term residents. Margaret Kwan from the UCSB Vice Chancellor's Office for Student Affairs was involved in this throughout. Jordan Killebrew represented District 2, and Rob Hoyman was our representative for property managers and property owners in Isla Vista. Rob's property at 661319 DP was one of the hardest hit during the Deltopia event when there was a concert on his property. His tenants made thousands of dollars. They caused thousands of dollars of damage and after effects as a result, and he's been very proactive in this. We thank everybody who was in the working group with us for their input. Next slide, please, John. So these are the problems we're trying to solve with this. We're trying to, and these are not in order. I mean, obviously in the priority, I'd flip them. Bluff and rooftop safety is our biggest priority, keeping people safe that way. Public right-of-ways is another priority in the revisions that we're proposing. We saw during the unfortunate fatal fall that we had to spend an inordinate amount of time clearing intersections of party goers because DJs were on a second story balcony and utilizing a public roadway as their stadium. And there were several hundred people in the roadway that prevented fire engine and AMR from accessing this. So that's a very important part of this for us. Infrastructure, as we mentioned, and has been talked about already, our fire safety, structural safety of bluff facing areas, and just the simple fact that we're watching a road in front of us. And then these paid parties. I have nothing against a party, but when people are coming in and capitalizing on a residential space, utilizing that space for commercial means, there's problems that come with it. I already mentioned. I'll mention some more. The next slide, please. We've talked about this ad nauseum. The only point I want to bring out of this is that during the event where Benny fell, he was at a live concert that was packed with people on a balcony that was bluff facing, and people were climbing over the balcony throughout the night to utilize the restroom. Thank you very much. Good. To utilize the restroom, i.e. peeing off the cliff, and we're hanging out on the other side of the barrier. And so we know that was happening throughout that event, largely because there weren't restroom facilities. You're talking about an apartment complex of one bathroom for several hundred people that were there at the party. And so I just want to point that out as part of how I think this all ties together. So I am not going to read all these, but this slide and the next slide after it are all the laws that already describe why a festival on a residential property is already illegal. So what we're really doing with these revisions to the festival ordinance, in large part, aren't really changing laws. We're bringing it, the point is to bring it all into one place where we can point to the public in very clean language that this is illegal, this is legal, this is not. And good luck, talking to someone at midnight on a Friday and asking them, have you looked at the land use development code to make sure that your permit's appropriate? So this, and then if you can jump to the next slide, Jonathan, all of these reasons are already in existing either California law or local laws about why we can't have these outdoor festivals in a residential zone. I'll leave that at there for later explanation. And then a quick reminder, this is the zoning map for IV. That pretty much makes all of Isla Vista is really residential. You have the parks, which are recreation, and you have the loop, which is commercial. But everything pretty much is a residential unit in Isla Vista. And so where these things can be legally conducted are in the parks, are in the commercial district, or inside, like at Rockfire. Okay. Thank you. So the goals for the new ordinance are to provide, like I said, clear guidance to the public on what are allowed activities in residential zones and protect residents and visitors from criminal prosecution. What I mean by that is with this ability to point directly to the festival ordinance and then the social host ordinance, which will tie into it, we can use an education approach first. And, like I love the point you made, Director Deschler, about we are not just the only enforcement arm. What you'll see, I think, in the social host ordinance sections that we'll talk about later is our best enforcement is peer pressure. And so if we have people who are willing to police their own party goers and their friends with the fact that their party might get shut down, I think this problem will eventually solve itself as a result. As we've seen with other things like visible kegs from the street, which were a huge problem back in the day, we no longer have that as an issue because people are policing themselves. Also want to discourage the abuse of those residential properties for profiteering activities, discourage underage alcohol and drug distribution. A lot of these parties that are paid parties are opportunities for underage people to consume alcohol or pay to purchase alcohol. And the people who are serving it are not trained in over-serving issues or checking IDs or all those sorts of things. Obviously prevent overcrowding that leads to the bluff and balcony falls. And balcony collapses is another big one too. We've had those here we've had a rooftop collapse in SLO. We had the unfortunate collapse in Berkeley. So these things are very much on our minds when we see our buildings over capacity with party goers. We also want to provide a legal pathway that's really much clearer for people, how they can hold a legal event and give our local government agencies the ability to hold these events and endorse them. And then next slide, please. So the changes that we're really proposing, and I'll share some of the specific language, but the overall effort is to add Deltopia as a permanent section that prohibits outdoor festivals and similar activities during that first week of the spring quarter, the Deltopia weekend. The current language has Halloween included in perpetuity, and we are just asking for Deltopia to be added so that we don't have to continue going back to the BOS. The outdoor festival permit would an outdoor festival permit would be required for an outdoor festival of 250 attendees or more now. That's down from 500. So it would prompt a requirement for someone who's holding an outdoor festival to, to get a permit if they are going to have a concert that's 251 or more people. Outdoor festivals over 250 people are prohibited at all times on residential property in Isla Vista. Outdoor festivals or similar activities that require a ticket, purchase, or donation for entry are prohibited at all times in residential properties in Isla Vista. That's right there will help us solve the paid party issue that's going on, and the out-of-towners who are making a lot of money and capitalizing on our community. The outdoor festival and similar activities that sell alcohol would be prohibited at all times on residential property as well. So there are some parties where you don't need a ticket to enter, but once you enter, you can purchase alcohol. That's already against state law, but it gives us an opportunity locally to engage with enforcement, and also gives us an authority to shut a party down if that's happening. And then penalties for hosting an outdoor festival or similar event where a ticket is required would be considered a misdemeanor, and that would help us really discourage these out-of-town groups from coming in. It could be an arrestable offense if you're hosting a commercial party. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is the definition of an outdoor festival. On the left in your packet, you see the current definition. On the right is the proposed definition. It doesn't change a lot, except we tried to clean up the language. And so we really didn't change anything about the intent of the section other than trying to clarify what was an outdoor festival. And then you notice that the attendee number that's required for this to happen drops. The important thing I want to point out in either section is the language that, of course I lost it just as I looked down for it. This applies only to festivals that happen at a place other than a permanent building, structure, or installation designed for the purpose of conducting such activities. So an event at Anascoya Park or Little Acorn Park or anywhere else in those commercial or park recreation districts like I showed, those are already allowed. And this doesn't prohibit those from continuing because those are places designed for these kinds of events. What an outdoor festival really is intended for, and the language currently and new, is if someone has, let's say, a large ranch property in the valley, and they bring in a big stage that they build on site, and they bring in generators, and they bring in porta potties and all that sort of stuff. That pasture is not designed for those kinds of events. That's what triggers the need for an outdoor festival. If you're going to shut down the end of DP to hold a concert, that would require an outdoor festival permit because it's not a natural place where these things are designed to occur. So our current spaces that we already have don't need a special permit to continue. I want to make sure that point is highlighted. The next one, please. Okay. So I'm not going to read this whole thing. This basically is the existing language with the change in number 1 to make Deltopia an added subsection in perpetuity. And then just the definition of what an outdoor festival is there as well. And then the real addition that we're adding is the next slide. There we go. Is that B section? Okay. Which says that any outdoor festival or similar activity okay, so let me make sure I'm clear. This is the section that prohibits outdoor festivals in residential zones in Isla Vista. So this does not prohibit someone from having a party. It doesn't prevent them from having a band or a DJ. It just essentially caps that limit at 250 attendees or less. If you decide to have a large party of 251 people or more, then that would require the permit, which would be, if this goes through, impossible to get because you can't have an outdoor festival inside a residential zone. We want to be respectful of people's First Amendment rights to assembly and allow those things to continue and honor Ivy's tradition of, deep tradition of music. So those concerts and things get to continue. But we try to limit the amount of attendees and the pressure that it puts on, especially our residential zones. And then this next section here, this is the one, and again, it's really wordy, so you have your packet, I won't read it back to you. But this section is what would prohibit a paid party or a commercialized party from occurring in Isla Vista. And it specifically talks about the need for a musical performance to be a component of that. So whether it's a DJ or a live band, that element of it combined with a paid event would make it illegal. So again, we're trying to thread the needle between celebrating and encouraging First Amendment assemblies, but really look at what are the things that we're dealing with. And it's these concerts, i.e. outdoor festivals, coupled with paid admission, okay? And then the next section on that one would be the B section, which is essentially similar language for events that sell alcohol. So again, not a ticket entry, but sell alcohol once you're inside. And so those are the changes we're requesting. I want to emphasize how much I appreciate Ella and Olivia and Jonathan's participation in this. I thought everybody brought some really great ideas to the table, a lot of good questions. It's a very murky law, the way it was written already, and we're just trying to clean it up and provide the public with some clear direction on what they can and cannot do, but honor the ability of everyone's rights for assembly, but also try and keep the public safe.
All right, thank you for that update. Thank you for walking us through it. Directors Craig and Scholes, is there anything you would like to add?
Yeah, we had pretty extensive discussion on this, and we're comfortable with everything that the Foot Patrol is adding in. We think that the provisions outlined in this will continue to promote a party culture in Isla Vista that encourages safe and local and smaller parties, not in a way that wishes to crush it altogether, in a way that continues to promote specifically Isla Vista's large band, not promote, but allow for the band scene within Isla Vista, as there are many talented individuals here who would like to play live music, but in a way that is on a smaller scale and on a safer scale.
Yeah, this does a really good job of clarifying the expectations for people in Isla Vista. Frankly, it was a really good idea to clarify the language so that it's very easy to reference and make clear for those in Isla Vista, and make it very, very clear what is and what is not allowed. So.
Awesome, thank you. And staff, is there anything you want to add to this? Okay. Do any directors have questions at this time of these proposed changes, this item? Director Topliff.
I am confused about the whole outdoor festival concept, because I'm thinking that I see parties that are indoors and are smaller than 250 people, where people pay to go there. And so they aren't on the radar with this, and that's all just fine.
No, good question. The way that it's worded is a paid party, even if it's under 250, is illegal in a residential zone.
But if it's inside a house, how would it fit the definition of an outdoor festival?
Well, it's because it's in the language. So I'm trying to search just to point directly to it. Or actually, if you have the page outdoor festival ordinance, that's the actual language, proposed new language. So you go to page, I think it's 3. No, the last page, 6-70.02.
But it says where the music is performed outdoors, and isn't that not always the case? Sometimes it's performed indoors.
So you read through A, outdoor festivals is defined in section 670 is the definition, or any other musical festival, music, concert, festival, musical activity which performed live or mechanically accessible to the, I'm skimming, but accessible to the public. So that's what prohibits it from those occurring. So it's sort of like, again, the wording here, but it's like outdoor festivals and other activity where a ticket is required are illegal on residential zones.
It's both.
It's
Outdoor.
right, it's both. And so if there is a fee required to entry, the capacity isn't an issue. Because it's not an outdoor.
Whether or not it's indoors or outdoors is an
Correct.
issue.
No, sorry. It's both. So outdoor festivals are illegal, and any other activity that's similar to that, that charges a ticket for entry where music is a component of it.
And I mean, I just wonder if it isn't more clear if you just say in the definition where music is performed by live musicians and leave out the word outdoors altogether.
So like in this area, this line says like dance or similar musical activities. So it's like this long list of like definitions basically. And then at which music is provided by paid or
So it's like it's true. Outdoor festivals and similar activity are both. And similar activity being stuff that occurs inside too. So yeah, it's covered.
It like is more expansive.
Okay.
Do you have a question?
I'm just so impressed because I think this looks really good. And I love the group of people that all worked on this, so that I know that UCSB issues have been looked at, the student perspective, IVRPD. I love the idea that you've tried to make it simpler and just cleaned up the language. So I did have some questions. How does this address roof and patio? Yes.
We will get there with social.
Yes.
Okay, we're gonna get there.
We will
You
get
scared
there.
me when you put your finger like that. I was like, you like channeled my mother or something. Okay, super. Okay, that's really good. And then, and I love what you were saying, Carrie, about, so we're talking about outdoor festivals, but we're talking about festivals in general. Any festival that has live music and is paid entry or live and includes alcohol. Those are prohibited over
Those
250.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, no, I think that's awesome.
No, let me clarify.
Yeah.
If it sells alcohol or it requires a ticket, regardless of capacity or regardless of attendees, it's illegal.
Yeah.
And that's year round, correct?
Year round.
Year round. That's really great. Okay, so we're gonna get to the roof and the patio, and I think I had another issue I wanted to talk about. Oh, I know. This came up in our previous conversation. Is there, if someone has to get a permit, well, okay, hear me out and then just correct me all the ways you need to. How do we get people who host parties of up to 250 to make it a requirement that they put portable bathrooms on the property? Because we are hearing that that's an issue, and you mentioned it with the issue with Benny's Fall.
For sure.
Right, so I just wonder, does that come up at all of making that a requirement?
So that would be, that falls back to the planning department.
Okay.
Which gets convoluted quickly because if someone were to do the right thing and file for a permit, I'll use Live Oak as an example, or Lucidity Festival is an easier one. So Lucidity Festival, they have a large concert, right? And they go and get the permit because they know they're going to be over 250 people. And to get that permit, the planning department says, okay, you're going to have 5,000 attendees. You need a bathroom for every 500 people. They do the math. And Lucidity says, okay, we will provide that. They say, okay, now we need X amount of security for that. And you need your ABC license approved by the sheriff. You know, they have this checklist they have to go through. And so the planning department gets to hold them to task if they don't have enough bathrooms. And it's almost like a code enforcement level, and the planning division's enforcement wings a generous word.
Yeah.
They don't have anyone full-time doing that. But to do that, the short version is it would be very hard to accomplish that without requiring a permit for any assembly of people. And First Amendment issues being obviously very sensitive, we can't require a permit for any assembly amount of people. And so for anyone to have any concert of, 5, 10, 15, 100 would be difficult, but the short answer is I would punt that to planning.
Okay. I don't like that answer, but it has nothing to do with you.
I totally understand.
I want to figure out a way that we can look at the bathroom issue as part of having parties. So that's all, that's just in my mind, but okay. And then was there any, when you have this meeting, was there this group, was there any conversation about how fraternities and sororities have parties? Do they have paid parties? This would prohibit them, basically.
This would prohibit that, yeah, and
Okay.
it was actually brought up. Did you bring it up, someone in the group, we had originally proposed 100 as the basement for requiring a permit, 100 people.
Yeah.
Clubs and groups, and they were wondering.
Someone brought up a good point that there's clubs that, and fraternity sororities that naturally have 200, 250 people just with their members and then their guests. And we didn't want to impose upon them a need for a permit for those kinds of things. So we thought that we all agreed as a group that 250 was probably an appropriate beginning number. And I think that was a good observation.
So sororities or fraternities who hold a party under 250 but require a donation or paid alcohol would be prohibited.
Would be prohibited,
under
yes.
this. Okay, so there's no exemption for clubs. Okay, that's cool. Thank you.
Director Brand. So you mentioned under the carve out for festivals that are held at facilities that are designed for the playing of music. You mentioned parks. Would community centers and other UCSD facilities be included in that?
Yes.
Okay.
Because you're like right now we're sitting in a commercial loop, in a commercial zone. So your building there is designed for public events and public meetings and that kind of stuff. So it would be totally allowed, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I still am just having a little trouble understanding this. So in the proposed subsection that you drew my attention to point out that the music didn't have to be outdoors. This particular section is only about Halloween and spring break period. So at that time, you couldn't have a party in your house after 6 p.m. if there was amplified music, no matter how many people were there.
Are you going to shake your finger at her? Because I see you shaking your head.
So I pointed you to 6-70.02, which is totally, I know it's the very last.
Maybe looking at a different one.
Maybe the easier thing might be to look at this handout for outdoor festival. Okay. Where it actually lists, mine's in color, but it lists the language starting at 6. It says Article 6 outdoor festivals at the top of the page. So the last section there is the new section that addresses these paid parties year round. So 6-70.02, where it says outdoor festivals and other commercial activity prohibited. That and other commercial activity is the part that makes it prohibited year round. Section you were referring to
was just about those weekends.
Is just about those 2 weekends, which to answer that question, yes, that would put a noise curfew at 6 p.m. Like that exists right now.
I want to clarify, and so that current area, that's the way it currently exists. What you just outlined, that section A of 670.01, that A part is not being changed.
It's only being reworded just for clarity, because the existing version doesn't really specify volume or amount or anything like that. So we added in very, very clearly how we enforce it is if the music can be heard from a public right of way adjacent to the property line. So that's always been how we've enforced it, but it's been super unclear to people about what level of volume is allowed. So that's what we
I feel like your question might be about our events.
Well, I am surprised because I felt like when we went through our own festivals, we were told we had to shut down at 6. And as I read this, we're exempted because we would be in a commercial zone in a property designed for that
Yep.
purpose.
This-
100%.
We intentionally, as a
Well, I
group,
think that's
made
nice.
this language
Being
cleaner.
incentivized.
Yeah.
Made this language cleaner so that we would incentivize
Yeah.
groups to bring it
Yeah,
to
no,
you.
I think that's very nice.
All right, are there any further board questions at this time? Dr. Brandt?
How does this ordinance get enforced?
So, good question. There's a couple different components to it because there's a couple different elements. So my goal, particularly with the 6-70.101, the existing one right now, is that those are RJ eligible. So if someone is doing that on Halloween or Deltopia weekend, they can go to the restorative justice class as a first offense. A second offense would be a citation to criminal court. The paid parties and these parties selling alcohol, those I think we need to take a stronger stance on, and those would be a criminal citation and or an arrest depending on the circumstances there. All of that comes after, I think, a good period of education to the public to make sure they understand that this is a new law and that it's coming. And that we, take a low and slow approach and we educate the public first and then we use RJ. Because I mean, we just finished an RJ class just a minute ago.
RJ, restorative justice. Okay, just got it.
Yeah, sorry, restorative justice. Colby Carroll, who just came in and handed some paperwork, he's our CRD and he teaches that class. They just finished. So that's my goal.
Yeah, that helps clarify. So you spoke to, I'm looking at 670.02 or 01, because they have similar language. Under subsection C on 670.02, a person shall be deemed a violation of this section if they are the owner, tenant, or occupant of a property which is under their control and they're providing a location for the events to occur. So you mentioned the tenant and the occupant, or the person under the control. What about the owners?
Well, yeah, owners are in there.
Well, you mentioned how the enforcement would occur for tenants and occupants, but how would the enforcement occur?
Oh, if it's different than the tenant?
For the owners.
So the way that law is typically applied is whoever's in charge of the space. So if it's a residential or it's a rental property and the property manager or the property owner is not participating in the crime, we wouldn't be pursuing that. It would typically fall to the tenant who organized the party, who got paid by the promoter to be there, or whatever. We try to find the person who's most responsible.
So owners are not required in this to be a part of the solution. It's all on you to
Oh, I see.
enforce. Is that correct, or am I missing?
From a legal standpoint, I can't really make them do anything, but we have good relationships with the property owners and managers, and I think that we have good communication with them to make sure they know what's happening on their property. That incentivizes them to make sure their releases are followed. If that makes sense.
Okay, I hear that, but I struggle with it a little bit just because I don't know if this has been on the books for like 30 years and doesn't seem like that's the good relationships have always worked. I mean, I think about in my experience, if I try to throw a 200-person party at my property, I'd probably have an eviction notice on my door, before the weekend was over.
Or at least a fine.
Yeah, yeah, and Val's probably thinking the same thing for her tenants, right?
And they're gonna.
And so I guess I'm just wondering, because it seems to me like a lot of what this is trying to target is behavior that's happening on a very select group of properties. And I guess I'm wondering if there is plans for any enforcement on the owners that are aware of this, aware of the law, whereas maybe even the tenants might not be aware of the law, but the owners are aware of it and allowing it to happen.
If we're aware of an owner who's condoning the activity, then they would have to be part of the solution is pursuing them as well and addressing it with them.
So what does condoning mean?
They know what's happening and
don't care.
They allow it to continue, or sometimes if they're taking a cut from the promoter for it, if they're hosting it, if they've had if we have one of these properties, like we have several in town, I'm sure everyone can think of the names, where the parties continue and continue and continue, and we keep documenting crimes coming out of there, that to me is they're complicit in the behavior at that point, and we would look at these sections as something that they'd be responsible for too.
And has that been done before?
Not in my recent memory anyway. And can I address another point?
Yeah, sure, of course.
Those words, owner, tenant, or occupant, my understanding and my support for keeping that language, I didn't change this language, but keeping that language the way it is you probably don't come as a shock if we come on the property, all of a sudden nobody lives there. And so we also might come on a property for a party like this, and it's really not the tenant who's the most responsible, but might be the DJ who we've told 3 other times to turn it down, and it just keeps going. So this gives us the opportunity to address this with the most appropriate person, whether that is the owner, or if it is the tenant who's hosting the party, or the occupant who may be the DJ or the party promoter or someone like that. So that's the language that it is. And you have a question?
I just thought what Spencer was saying was a very good point. And, you know, you talked a little bit about enforcement coming through peer pressure. And I would think a great enforcement arm of all this would be property owners, because, you know, they've got very highly coveted properties. There's very little vacancy. You know, they've been around long enough to know the rules, and also, you know, they should be involved in a solution that helps create a culture here that is safe and good for everybody. And so I would think that that would potentially be a really good way to go, because I think a lot of these leases already say you can't do this kind of stuff. And, you know, so the landlord has a tremendous enforcement tool in their tool belt.
Definitely. In fact, tomorrow morning is our property manager meeting, where we start the year and actually do a version of this to them to show them what we're trying to accomplish. The vast majority of our property managers and our owners are on board with wanting their properties to be safe and wanting people to follow their leases. We have some people who are reluctant to engage and feel like they don't have any legal standing to intercede with some of these large parties that are occurring, and we're doing our best to educate them about their rights, but also their responsibilities. But that does become a part of the civil laws that we can't necessarily get involved in. So what we can do, and what we will be doing, announcing this to property managers in the morning, is we're bringing back the Penn report.
Oh, good.
Oh, thank you.
That's good. Thank you. A little revised, but for people who aren't familiar with the Penn report, it's a notification to property managers and owners of events that occurred on their property over the weekend that are significant. And so that is one of the ways that we're trying to engage those property owners to make sure they're aware of what's happening on their property.
Give us names and code violations.
We will not, so I don't, it's not the intent.
No,
Are you
they
at the meeting
used
tomorrow?
to. No, I'm not. They used to give us the names, the address, and the code violations.
We will give you the address and the code violation, but given privacy laws, it's gonna be up to the property managers to reach out to us for further information.
Can you give us whether it's apartment A or B?
We'll give you addresses, we're just not gonna give you names.
Okay.
Staff, I think you had a comment or a question.
I just had something from Jay.
Okay, please share it.
And I spoke to the lieutenant about this, but I said I'd ask the question for Jay in public. But his comment or question is he's bothered by the owner, tenant, or occupant clause in the commercial activity section of the festival ordinance. Occupant just seems insane. Making owner and tenant simultaneously in violation seems confusing, and this fails to deal with the problem of co-renters who protested, and like, now what are they gonna have to do? They normally would just leave for the weekend and say not my problem, but would they now have to physically block the party from happening?
So the 3 words are in there for the reason like I expressed, to address who is most appropriate or who is most responsible for the party. We don't cite, it would be impossible to cite everybody on site who's at a party. And that wouldn't be the intent. For people who are not participating in the party, it's usually rather obvious. They're in their bedroom or they leave. And so those aren't the people that are targeted for the citation. You know, given that these, if a lot of these are going to be restorative justice anyway, well, and criminal, they both give them the ability to plead not guilty to it and explain the circumstances as well. But I don't see many scenarios where someone who's not engaged in the party ends up getting contacted by us and is then held responsible for the event, because we need probable cause to believe that someone's responsible for the party. So that means that we need some sort of evidence, either something we've observed or something they've said or something we know, in order to write that citation. So I don't think that uninvolved people are going to be caught up in this event.
You got clarification. Are there any other board questions at this time?
I'm just pleased that you're bringing back the pen report. I think that's a really good tool. And I think some name and shame kind of approach is important with regards to landlords who allow parties to continue to happen over and over and over again.
All right, we'll go to public comment now. Ms. Sweat.
In regards to the comment from him regarding the wording and occupant, as a landlord, in all of our leases, it says jointly and in severally, that they're all, it's one for all and all for one. So let's say 3 people throw the party and 3 people don't. And the landlord needs to take action, say eviction, those 3 people are gonna be included.
Well, that's a civil issue that we're not involved in.
Okay, but just so you know, that you can maybe use that and say, look, if your landlord chooses to, proceed with civil
Well, we talked-
repercussions, it could include the other people who are absolutely innocent.
Again, peer pressures are what can be a powerful.
Yeah,
thing.
100%.
Thank you, Chair, members of the board. I really want to thank our lieutenant. I think it's done a really, really amazing job in taking all these different little things and putting it into something that's going to be coherent and understandable and hopefully effective. I mean, in the safe meetings, we're all there for one reason. We all need Isla Vista safer. We all want this place to be as beautiful as it is all the time, even on Friday and Saturday nights. That's what we're looking for. And there's different ways to approach it. We need education. And that needs to start at the university level with freshmen coming in. We need alternatives, which is what we do at the Park District and is what you folks do. But we also need the ability for these parties that are so large and become so dangerous. And I have 2 in my neighborhood. I'm not going to name names of which houses they are, but I have 2 in my neighborhood. And what comes out of there afterwards is absolute chaos and violence and all different other things. So I really appreciate the work of Olivia and Ella and Jonathan, and really coming to terms and talking things through and compromising and really looking at how do we get to where we're going with all these different elements and how do we help you. And I think we've got something here. And, social host is another little different piece of this, but, which I completely agree with also, but I think we've got something and I think it can start to change the center. I've been here for a long time and I've never seen parties like we have now. And I went out on Deltopia and I was terrified for our town. It felt so close to just going over that edge that I saw happen. What was that, 6 years ago? But I think this is great. And I'm hearing all of you and I'm listening to your questions and it sounds really good what I'm hearing. So I just want to thank you for listening to this, and I hope for your support because there's been a lot of work put into this and I really appreciate it.
All right, thank you for those comments, Mr. Surya.
Okay, I'm gonna hand these to you. I'm gonna have them face down and I'm gonna ask you to turn them right side up. It's kind of a little, I believe in pictures or it didn't happen.
Does public comment include show and tell? I'm not sure. Do we need
I
like
don't
a
like
legal
that quote,
ruling
but I'm
on
gonna
this?
So I'm gonna give you guys these and I'm gonna say that on Friday, I live next to one of the big party houses. And I'm not gonna take any,
Are we supposed to look at this now?
Okay, go ahead,
Okay.
look. It's Hammer House. I live next door, it's 6555 Segovia. That is a driveway where I live at.
Oh, good
And I
Lord.
took very good, pains to detail what's going on there, the activity. The first picture is a gentleman holding his genitalia while he is urinating in our driveway. I think he was trying to power wash it or something, but I don't think there's enough pressure behind it. Picture number 2 is a gentleman that is nitrifying my wife's plants with, again, the same tactic. holding his genitalia and urinating on it. And picture number 3 is a young lady that I think she was trying to nitrify my wife's plants, but she missed them by 2 meters. With that said, this is what I deal with every Friday or Saturday night that they throw one of these pay-to-play parties. Another aspect that, and as you can see in the first couple pictures, you'll see this barrier. There are signs. I have to put this across the driveway every time they have a party. And there is no trespassing, and this property is under video surveillance. But they ignore that. Oh, I didn't see the signs. Dude, what are you, illiterate? No. But here's what happens. They come in to try to sneak into the party next door. And I try to be nice. I come out and I go, may I help you? You will not believe the threats, including threats of death launched at me. I had one individual threaten to kill me because I stopped him from trying to get into the party next door. Okay? And I'm a little ticked off. Also, the racist comments I have endured. Oh, what are you, some rich white guy? First of all, the moment you drag race, I don't care what race you drag into your threats or your anger or whatever, that is racist. Secondly, I'm not a white guy. I'm a Latino. Yo soy Latino. I'm an immigrant to this country. I'm an immigrant. I just became a citizen 3 years ago to this country. I came here, and I got people threatening me to kill me. And then if I defend myself, then I face the possibility of assault charges. If one of these individuals decides to attack me, all of a sudden I'm the guilty party because I guess I'm a white guy or something. I'm not. I'm a Latino. We've had individuals, the litany of situations that occur with these pay-to-play parties. And no, I'm not. I guess everything I'm saying right now is unpopular. I don't care. This is not a popularity contest. I believe in reality. Those pictures are reality. Those pictures are reality. And I do believe in public shaming. Bring back the Penn report. And you know what? I'm showing those pictures. I'm shaming those individuals. And I'm proud to do it because they threatened my life. 3 weeks ago, we had 9 individuals threaten to beat my wife and me up. They threatened to beat us up. 9 against 2. Hey, we welcomed the challenge, but if we defended ourselves, it would have been assault. A few weeks before that, we had 4 of them. One of them threatened to kill me. One of them threatened to end my life because I was saying, no, you can't cut through here to sneak into the neighbor's party. So this is what the pay-to-play parties are producing. And I'm a little ticked off. I mean, I'm not ticked off at anyone here. I'm ticked off at these individuals, your constituents. These are the people that are going to find my views unpopular because, I'm saying, no, you can't come through a property and you can't threaten us with harm or death. You can't urinate on the property that we live on. It's not our property, but we take pride in it. Oh, and by the way, our apartment complex is 15 units, including ours. So yeah, we may seem like the funny. Oh, and another thing, ageist comments. Oh, you're old. Why are you living in Isla Vista? Dude, I've been living here longer than you've been born. Okay. So then, yeah, we're the old people. Okay, fine. Easy target. But the thing is this, there are 14 other units in our apartment complex. Of those 14 units, one may be sympathetic to the parties next door. The other 13, they're in fear for themselves every time they throw a party next door because of people like this coming into our property, urinating and threatening us. They're in fear of that. These are your constituents too. So again, it's like I hear, all this stuff about inequity and things like that. What about the inequity towards us based on racism, based on ageist threats, based on HUD violations? You shouldn't be living here because you're old. Death threats, the inequity of death threats, the inequity of threats to beat us up, the inequity of defiling the property where we live at with urination and stuff like that. Come on, let's be real here. We got a problem and it needs to be addressed. And I think that going forward with these ordinances is a great step in the right direction. They should have a little more bite, I feel, but that's just me. I come from a place where ordinances like that are really tough. Miami, Florida. Hialeah, the town I grew up in, it was tough. But I'm a little ticked off because these individuals, they have violated our space. Our space. And the thing about the self-policing aspect of it, if the neighbors throwing these parties were self-policing, those pictures wouldn't be happening. Remember, pictures are, I hate that saying, pictures or video, it didn't happen, but hey, it's happening. I had to prove that. Oh, and by the way, that's only just a few. I've got hundreds of these pictures, hundreds of them. So, the evidence is there. The evidence is definitely there. And this is the only thing I'm really ever going to get really ticked off about. My life was threatened. My wife's life was threatened. How would you feel if someone threatened your loved one, your partner, your significant other, your family member? How would you feel? How would these individuals who are making the threats feel? I'd like to find out. But you know what? Then it would be assault. This is crazy. I had one tell me, I'm not afraid of you. And I said, well, you don't have to be afraid to die. And today's a great day to find out. But I don't want to have to do that because then I'd be the guilty party. So this is what you're dealing with. You want to know? There it is. I decided to provide the proof and you have it. I'm sorry that I'm agitated, but people have threatened my life, my wife's life. That's more important to me. You go after my wife, you're coming after me. And that's pretty serious. So I just want to express that opinion, I feel. Thank you for allowing me to do so.
Thank you for sharing.
And I'm sorry for the graphic pictures, but like I said, evidence is evidence, and I like to provide it. I'm not going to say something without proof.
Thank you for those comments. Thank you for sharing those personal moments. Are there any other public comments at this time?
There's two on Zoom, Chris and Maya.
Yes, if we could go to Maya.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm going to be reading two public comments that were sent in. One is from Julia Barbosa that says, I'm writing in support of the proposed changes to the festival and social ordinances that will provide effective enforcement tools in order to eradicate illegal parties and events charging an entrance fee in residential areas and selling alcohol. These pay-for-play parties exacerbate serious health and safety issues in our community. They attract hundreds of people, many from out of town, to private residences with no infrastructure to handle the amount of guests/customers. The result is public intoxication, public urination, property damage, increase in crime and medical emergencies, overloading our first responders and law enforcement. It also creates dangerous scenarios for residents near these events if they get out of control, where an amicable resolution between neighbors becomes nearly impossible due to serious safety risk to disturb parties. This all contributes to additional need for law enforcement presence and will eventually lead to legal disputes. Another problem is the, quote, open party closed bathroom, quote, culture in Isla Vista. Large private residences, especially on Del Playa Drive, will host 500 plus people and offer 0 bathroom facilities. This means not just being a bad neighbor, but creating health and safety hazards where their guests and customers are urinating on public spaces, trespassing onto other people's private properties to urinate, or risking themselves near cliffside areas. Instead of merely propping up porta potties on a public street that end up disabled before the night is over and therefore not fulfilling their purpose, how are these residences being held responsible for the consequences of their large parties and events? I urge the board to discuss this issue during items 4.1, 4.2, and 4.5 this evening. I would also like to ask the board members to discuss your interactions with different segments of the Isla Vista population that are negatively impacted by the raging party scene, especially the most vulnerable: retirees, families with grade school children, residents whose primary language is not English, and how you are taking the Isla Vista community as a whole into consideration when discussing public policy. Isla Vista is seeing a rise in professional events, hired event companies, hired performers, hired security. In order to generate revenue, each event has to be bigger and better with more powerful equipment and has to advertise farther and wider. There is also an organized concert scene that is increasingly looking to recruit private residences as venues. All of these publicly advertised events should be taking place in appropriately zoned business or permitted public spaces. Private residences and residential zones are not public venues. I urge the board to support the proposed changes in an effort to work towards a more sustainable and equitable community. That is Julia's comment. I have one more from the EVPLA office from Osaze. On behalf of the Associated Student UCSB EVPLA's office, we wish to clarify our minimal role in the development of this legislation. While our office staff did participate in 2 festival ordinance working group discussions where we asked questions about the ordinance and its impact on students and offered suggestions. We had no independent authority in shaping this ordinance. Given our limited contribution to its creation and the fact that we did not author any part of this document, we are not in a position to take a stance endorsing it. Thank you. Osaze.
All right, thank you for those comments, Maya. You said the other user.
Chris Henson.
Chris, please share your comments.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for letting me speak. Yeah, so my name is Christy Harder, and I want to thank Lieutenant Tesla for the updates and the board for hosting this event. And I want to ask for the board's help in improved behavior in Isla Vista. I just, as a little background, grew up in Santa Barbara. I went to Santa Barbara High School, and I went to Santa Barbara City College. I'm a graduate of the UC system, UC Santa Cruz. And I do respect the First Amendment rights. And I do understand the deep history of music in Isla Vista. I also feel like there's a segment of the community that has not had a voice. The loud parties really impact our neighbors. It impacts me. I live with people of color. I happen to be white. But we've had people having sex on cars outside of our window. We've had a couple of pipe bombs go off. And what happens when these parties are done is that people scream all the way home. And I need help. I desperately need help. So I believe that all the stakeholders want a safer Isla Vista. I believe nobody wants violence. But what actually happens is so much more than what some of these things can enforce. And I do believe in peer pressure. And I'd really just like help among students to talk to each other, to say, hey, let's leave parties quietly, right? Because if law enforcement can't stop them at midnight because they're dealing with car accidents or something like that, those parties can go on not stopped until 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. And then when they leave, they scream all the way down the street. So there's a lot happening. I've had BB guns shot at my window. And then they didn't know where I was, so they retaliated against my neighbor and threw soda. So I'm not trying to point blame at anyone, right? Nobody is. We have out of town people that are taking advantage of the culture in Isla Vista. We have City College, we have UCSB, but we also have little kids that have to get up and go to school. We have people that are disabled. We have families that have to get up and go to work. So I would just really, really like help with all of this. I appreciate these changes. I 100% support the proposed changes. And I also support the fact of, not having police violence. I don't really think that's the problem in Isla Vista. So I appreciate being able to, have my peace. I've lived here 10 years. I didn't mean to live in Isla Vista. It just happened. And I appreciate many things about it. I appreciate my neighbors. I appreciate the ocean. I appreciate the IV co-op, and actually the students have so much life about them that it has made me younger. I'm in my 50s. So, if I can't beat them, I join them and I go downtown and I party at a club downtown. But having the condoms in the yard, the pipe bombs and the screaming as they go home and the really late nights of these parties, it's like Lord of the Flies here. And I'm just asking for some support in having better behavior and less violence. Thank you.
All right, thank you for those comments. Are there any further public comments on this issue? Yes.
I wanted to sort of piggyback on the last speaker and also Julia, and taking a look at this and disturbing the peace. And I'm wondering, first of all, I want to acknowledge that I understand that you have limited officers who enforce, the regulations and the penal codes and everything like that. But what specifically are the rights of an occupant or an owner in a residence for quiet enjoyment of their residence? You know, that's never been clarified to me.
Are you asking about,
You know, living in your house and then having a neighbor, regardless of the time, who is totally out of control? Whether, having your musical practices in the back with a full-on band, or deciding that their hot tub party, their music selection is so wonderful that they need to share it with the rest of the neighborhood. I mean, I'm talking about, just occupants of adjacent, buildings who are infringing upon, somebody else's personal enjoyment of their residence.
so the enforcement section that would be for that is disturbing the peace. 415 parenthetical 2 penal code. And for several recent years, the district attorney's office has taken the position that someone playing their music in the backyard is not a willful and wanton disregard of your peace, or a willful and wanton attempt to disrupt your peace. Okay, and so what the district attorney has looked at historically is it malicious? Meaning, are they really trying to just upset and disrupt your quality of life, or are they just enjoying their life at an unreasonable volume, or at a volume that's unreasonable too? That's been their position for several years. We've asked them, and I think we're making headway in bringing you back that as a citation that we can offer to people, neighbors, to these kinds of parties or these kinds of loud events, where it won't be handled by the district attorney's office, but it would be a citizen's arrest, which it is right now, but it would be treated as an infraction. And what would happen is, if a citation was issued on your behalf, you'd sign a piece of paper just like this, that you and the disturbing party would both go to court and be in front of a judge or a commissioner and both explain your sides of it. And the judge would determine if it was malicious and willful. And so that is the biggest leap forward in that progress that we've had in the last probably 5-6 years. And so I'm hoping in the next week, I'll have a very clear answer on that process and what that'll look like moving forward.
Just I read the Penal Code 415 today after I went over and asked the neighbor to please, modify their volume. And she was rather belligerent about it, so I walked away from the situation. Reading the Penal Code, I thought there was a stipulation there that if you mention to a person, that they were in fact disturbing your peace, and then they continue at that volume, then it was willful.
That's historically been what we interpreted it as, and for the first 15 years of my career, that's what we used, was the notification, you're bothering your neighbors, you need to turn it down. And I, to be completely honest, don't understand the back office justifications that happened during the pandemic to drop that as a citation that they would file. But regardless, we're getting it back in a revised way.
Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes, please.
There's real estate law that says quiet enjoyment of the property. That's real estate law.
That's civil law though, so I can't.
But as a landlord, how can I enforce that?
So I guess the short answer is you would need to know what's happening in your property.
Right.
And so
I have another band who sends me video and audio of, and the last time he did this, it was people talking, which I did not feel was overly loud. Parties, yes, we shut it down and we fine, but that's after the fact, before I find out about it. She doesn't necessarily want to interact with the student who is belligerent or threatening. What else can we do?
Well, when you call us, our option or our ability is to offer you a citizen's arrest for disturbing the peace. But that by law requires the interaction. And it doesn't, like, we don't make, you're not going to go fill out the citation or put the handcuffs on them or give them the court date, but it does require a willingness to go to court and testify about. It does require a willingness to go to court and testify about why it was disruptive to your peace. Real estate code, all those codes, we can't touch those things. So it's really up to the tenant, or sorry, the property manager or owner to know what's happening on their property. Part of that effort is the pen report, and.
But you're not putting the names down, so I can't go after the individual. I
No,
understand
you
the
can.
privacy, but.
You just have to ask him. You have to ask him for it.
Oh, I missed that. I apologize.
You ask.
If you ask me for it and it's releasable, if it's PR, Public Records Act eligible, which most things are, then we will release it to you.
Excellent. That answered a lot.
All right, I see no further public comment on this item, so I'll go.
Sitting on my hands.
I'll go back to the board for any board discussion. Do any board members wish to start?
I was just gonna make an observation that, as you've developed the new festival ordinance and the social host ordinance, you're giving yourself a lot more work. And it made me think just like how important it is for us as well as university to think about how we can be more proactive to help you, when I say you, enforcement, do the work that you're trying to do. Because so many times I see that law enforcement gets blamed for doing what you're doing, and yet everyone wants you to do what you're, well, a lot of people want you to do what you're doing. And so I just think that we've talked about this in this board many times about what other kinds of programs can we be involved with to help in the enforcement of some of these provisions. We talked about like an IV group that would be kind of similar to the CSO. Anyhow, that's all. I just was thinking about that I think that we need to think like, what can we do more to help you as you put out this new revised ordinances? Yeah.
Thank you for those comments. I'll be brief in my comments. I'm pleased to see this ordinance with its changes. I'm pleased with the work that our directors and our staff and our law enforcement professionals have done together. I'm really glad that this is also a larger group with folks beyond us. It makes me really happy to hear the support from our long-term residents on this issue and other types of residents on this issue. So I will be supporting the changes for this.
Are we having a separate presentation on social hosts, or is it?
It is a.
Oh,
yeah,
it's another one? Okay,
it's
got
the
it.
next discussion item.
Okay.
Director Brand.
Well, I want to start because when we talk about this, sometimes we talk about the negatives. We have to talk about the negative. But I want to also reframe and talk about the positive, which is that the whole reason that we even have the capacity to try and solve these neighborhood issues is because we don't have to deal with the nastier stuff. We're dealing with it less and less. What the crime stats from the sheriff's office show is that we've had a 50% reduction in crime in the last 6 years. And so I think that that is a huge thing to be celebrated, because the biggest drops have come in the statistics for assault and battery and robbery. And so we should all breathe easier at night and feel lighter on our feet when we walk on the streets at night because of that. But the other thing is, I am not surprised that we have a room full of long-term residents like myself that are here saying, let's do this. Because, you know, like one of the public commenters, I also never expected to live here for almost 10 years. And it does make me feel younger, but I also feel the impacts that you're all talking about. But the thing that's crucial that we all need to remember is that we are a component of the solution, but in order to solve these issues, we need student and resident buy-in from young people. And so that's always going to be my North Star when we try to tackle these things. With the ordinance, I mean, everything that's in here, I support. I think the thing that I'm most excited about is the paid for parties, which have really just been an unfortunate development that has taken us backwards, that has near unanimous community support. In fact, some of the angriest emails that I've gotten about these parties have been from students. The thing that I struggle with is the enforcement side. I think good public policy is carrot and stick. And I see right now that we've got the stick for the tenants and the people that are involved in planning these parties, but we don't have anything in regards to some of the property owners that are not acting in good faith. While many are acting in good faith, I would say most are. A small minority is not. The same thing can be said for students. Many are acting in good faith. In fact, most are, but a small minority are not. So I think that we just got to bring these two into congruence and maybe adjust it a little bit more, because I don't see what this is as being something that has solved the problem in the last 30 years when it comes to the neighborhood issues. I think we need to try to do something different. I think it was Einstein who supposedly said that doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, is insanity. You know, I really think that we need an additional tool that holds bad faith property owners accountable. So I think that this is almost ready for prime time, but it's not quite there yet for me. I'd like to see that adjustment before we move forward.
Well said.
All right, are there any further board comments on this?
Why are you looking at me? I already made a comment.
All right, is there a motion on this?
I had a public comment and you never get back to me.
Oh, dear.
Oh, okay, sir on Zoom, if you could please share your public comment at this time.
Thank you very much. I'm Bruce Murdoch. I've lived in IV over 50 years. The disturbance of the peace is pretty succinct, and we used to use that. It used to be enforced. And 415 PC subsection number 2 is any person who maliciously or willfully disturbs another person by loud or unreasonable noise. It can be just loud talking. And that had worked for us down here in the Rio Del Mar for a long time. And the sheriff would generally go over and talk to the noisemakers. And if they didn't shut up, the next time they came over and they got a ticket. In fact, our next door neighbor, in fact, the poor guy that just answered the door, who wasn't part of the party, ended up getting the citation because he came over the next morning and said, you know, he talked me up, and finally he brings out the citation. He says, I got this. Can you retract that? Can you do anything about it? I said, no, I can't. But now of late, I call the sheriff or the non-emergency number for disturbance of the peace, and either we don't get response or the officer comes out and says, well, my peace isn't being disturbed. 415 says, the reporter of 415, it was me, my peace is being disturbed, and I'm the sole determinant of whether or not my peace is being disturbed 24/7, and I'm the one that's willing to sign a citizen's complaint or a citizen's arrest. I've done so twice in the 51 years that I've lived here. But this doesn't happen anymore. So, you know, I'm glad that you're trying to address this with more moral laws, but why don't you just enforce the ones you have in the books? That's my point.
Thank you for those. Thank you for those comments. I'm going to come back to the board. And so is there any motion by board members on this item?
I'd like to make a motion in support of these changes to the ordinance.
All right, is there a second in that?
I have a question.
Okay.
When is this going to come before the Board of Supervisors?
We're hoping that with your support that we can move forward to target the November 7th meeting as the first reading.
Got it. Thank you.
President Aguilar, if I may.
Yes.
I just have one comment really quickly for the board's consideration is to make sure that there's an Oxford comma everywhere it says tenant or occupant or owner. That way it is equally enforceable among the 3.
Director Brandt.
Is there an urgency to bring it forward on the 7th?
Short answer, yes, just because the support is there, and we want to make sure that with the requirements of the 30-day reading and then the 30-day implementation that we have something in place by the time that Deltobia hits, and with the DOS schedule of the holidays, we get harder and harder to hit that target before the date. And if I may intercede one other aspect to a concern you brought up. The festival host ordinance gives us the ability to go after the property managers who are complicit in these activities. But what we really get our teeth with the property managers is when in the social host ordinance changes that I'll present next. And there's very clear language in there that also makes them susceptible to fines or penalties if they allow these things to continue. So I think your concerns are addressed in that section.
All right, so we heard a motion to adopt these changes from Director Topliff. Is there a second of this motion?
Support these changes.
To support these changes.
Second. You did a motion? I did a second.
All right, is there any public comment on this motion?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for those comments. I will now move to a vote on this motion. All directors who are in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say no. All right, and this motion passes 6-0-0-1. Yes.
Sorry, did you make a different motion after?
No,
No, okay.
no, I said to support these changes.
Yeah, support these
And
changes.
Marcus misquoted me as adopting them, which was obviously not correct.
What's written is the right.
It's been a short day.
Thank you.
All right, so now we will move on to item 4.3, the revised social host ordinance.
Okay.
Okay.
Back.
Thank you.
Back in seat.
Back in seat. So this is the language of the social host ordinance, and just to recap for people who aren't familiar, 36.6 of the county ordinances gives us the ability to declare a party or social gathering a public nuisance when certain events occur as a result of the attendees at the event. And this is all that legal language that says that to that effect. Now there's two categories of offenses called the 3 or more and the 1 and done. And in the current laws, there are a long list of offenses that we have to witness 3 or more of. And if we do witness 3 or more of, then we have the authority to shut that party down as a result. Now you'll notice, or you're in your copy, or in the current language rather, the 3 or more includes felony offenses like arson, attempted arson, assault on a peace officer or firefighter, sexual battery, battery with serious injury, assault with a deadly weapon. And the working group all came to the reasonable conclusion that felonies probably that are committed like that are more appropriate in the 1 and done section. And so we're moving a lot of existing language over to the 1 and done section, and then adding additional crimes that we identified as a group that need to be included in that 1 and done section, to include which people touched upon here, lewd and lascivious acts. So those would be lewd acts that might occur on a neighboring property to a party or on the property of the gathering. Brandishing a weapon, either a gun or a knife, in a threatening manner, and also contributing to the delinquency of a minor. Contributing the 272 of the Penal Code, minor in that definition is anyone under 18 years old. So it doesn't, it wouldn't be quite the thing for someone who's at a party who's 18, 19, 20, who might be drinking. This would be targeting juveniles at a party. And if you're hosting a party where you're allowing juveniles to party, that would give us the authority to shut the party down because of that. And so you'll see in your page, the first page is what's currently listed on the 3 offenses, and then the 1 and done. And then the second slide after that, we can go to that one, is what it would look like with some of the revisions. And I'm actually recommending we get rid of the body contact or slamming, moshing, because that's just really not a thing. It's a bit dated. And so as we were in our discussions over the festival and some of these other changes, it dawned on me that again, not just law enforcement, but public safety. This is our opportunity to contribute to the bluff and rooftop safety as well. And so we've added in language that parties that allow people to climb onto and remain on a rooftop, or allow people to climb onto and over a fence, that becomes part of the one and done section, and we can shut a party down as a result. That's where I think the peer pressure comes in, because if they know their party's gonna get shut down because people are on the roof or climbing over the fence, they will eventually self-police themselves rather quickly. We've seen it happen with other changes and with the social host ordinance stuff that we already have. And I think that our actual intervention on that is going to be very, very limited. Also in the one and done section gives us the authority to shut down a paid party or a party selling alcohol. So you notice there's overlap with the festival ordinance.
Yeah.
The festival ordinance gives us the authority to write a citation for it. The social host ordinance gives us the authority to shut the party down. So that's how those two things work together. And then the highlights in the next slide. Johnny, move to that if you would. The main highlights there are that felonies and some serious misdemeanors move to that from the 3 or more to the one and done, like we showed. Those sections are lewd in the city acts, brandishing and contributing to the delinquency of a minor are added. Climbing onto a roof is added. Climbing over and onto an exposed bluff over a fence or railing is added. And then parties that charge a ticket, fee or donation for entry, and parties that sell alcohol are all added to those sections as well. And then our last change to the social host ordinance sections is the fines. Fines are a little dated and they didn't have a whole lot of teeth to them. It was a $100 first infraction. Your second offense within a year was a $200 infraction, and the third was $500. And we find that that's really not enough to deter anybody, especially nowadays, where they can pass the hat and collect 3 times that in a matter of minutes. And also the commercial parties make far more than that in profit, and doesn't dissuade them. So what we've come up with is a progressive scale that's a little bit more significant. So the first offense would be an infraction and a fine of $500. A second offense within a year of that first infraction would be a fine that jumps to $1,000. That's if you have a party, maybe say 2-3 months apart and you have 2 issues. But if you have a party and you start that party back up after we shut it down the first time, or you have a party within that same 24 hours, that actually becomes a misdemeanor on that second offense, and it's an arrestable misdemeanor, and with up to 30 days in jail time and a $1,000 fine. Realistically, truthfully, no one's spending 30 days in jail, but it gives us the ability to arrest on that and remove the problem. Those second offense parties are our biggest issue and the biggest danger, and that's why we want that escalating ladder on the and so those are the other changes that we're asking for there. And that one's a lot more simpler to get through. So with that, I'll open it.
All right, thank you for those updates. To Directors Craig or Schultz, of anything you want to add to this item?
I just want to agree with the lieutenant. A lot of the things in the original one were like quite outdated. There were just a couple things in there. I forgot exactly what they were, but they were just very outdated. So picking them up and sorting them appropriately was well done. We've also added things that are much more relevant for Isla Vista today as opposed to decades ago. So this is quite useful and should hopefully find benefit for Isla Vista.
And I think on that note, to what the lieutenant was saying about cliff and roof safety, and like self-policing, one of the things that is currently in the one and done, and that we don't see in Isla Vista anymore is kegs, really. They're not at very many parties because they will get your party shut down immediately. And so hopefully that same effect is had with the blood safety and the roof safety.
All right, thank you. Any directors with questions?
I have a question.
Yes, please.
So my questions are under, when it says 3 offenses, so what it means here is that if you have 3 offenses, then you will be fined, right?
You could be subject to a fine, yeah. Citation.
Okay, if there's only one of these offenses, one of them, what happens?
We would address it on an individual level with that particular person. So battery, as an example, which is a fight,
Yeah.
we would be addressing it with the two people who are involved in the fight, assuming it's two people.
Okay.
But if now the third fight occurs and breaks out, now we actually, we have a party that's more of a problem, and that would be addressed with the hosts.
Okay, so then, this all relates to on a property. Okay, so, and then, so you talk about, when there is a one and done, or if there are 3 offenses, who gets the citation? How do you define who gets the citation?
So that language is existing already, and I'll see if I have it here for you to show. Because I only included language that we're changing. Well, I don't want to take all the time with it. The short version is it's identical to the festival ordinance where the tenant, the occupant, or the owner would be responsible, or could be, any one of those could be responsible depending on the circumstances for what's occurring. And so it could be an owner if they're hosting the party and they know this is going on and they're endorsing a paid party, for example. It could be the tenant if they have, we have a assault with a deadly weapon, or there are 3 fights or something like that, and they allow the party to continue. That would be a potential person right there. It could be an occupant also, because the law says that once we declare a party a public nuisance, you must leave. And so occupants are included there too, because if you refuse to leave, once we've ordered you to leave, then you're subject to that same citation as well. So you may not be the one hosting the party, but if someone refuses to leave and disperse from the party, then they would become subject to that citation as well.
Okay, I guess I was confused because I'm thinking, there's kind of 2 things that are happening. There's someone who's doing something on a property that's illegal, they're gonna get a citation or whatever. But then there's also the people that are hosting the party. If the 3 things happen, or one of these one and done things happen, then there's a parallel track that they're also getting a citation. I guess I just need to wrap my head around it. There's like 2 layers of enforcement going on here.
We wouldn't, well, the 3 offenses that are occurring could potentially, each of those offenses could get a citation.
Yeah.
Or it could be something, which is more often the case, where 3 of those things are observed and either they resolve themselves, or it's, like as we walk up, we might see urinating in public 2 people, and we might see another person with a container of alcohol, and we confirm they're a minor in possession. Those are our 3. We bypass those 3 infractions and go address the larger issue of the party.
Got it.
And so it could go both ways. They
Got
could
it,
end up
got
with
it.
all 3 citations and then we go address the party, or it's just depending on the circumstances.
Got it. Okay, yeah. Awesome, thank you.
And are there any other questions from the board at this time? Dr. Brandt?
So how can this be enforced on property owners?
Because if we have to show that they have some complicity in it, right? And it has to be.
How about them owning the property?
That's not enough. Because again, keep in mind that we need not just probable cause, but if we take it to court, we need proof. We need to kind of show a proof beyond a reasonable doubt level that they knew about it and they knew about these offenses occurring. And so we have to build a case on them like we would on anybody else. And so simple ownership of the property, especially for people who aren't on site, is really, really hard to do. Because, even on the ones where the party's now ongoing or it's in progress and we call the property manager, say, hey, there's a property up, there's a concert on your property. We have a lot of them who will reach out right then and there and say, hey, shut it down, you're in violation of your lease. But we also may have someone who that answered the phone or is on vacation or is out of state and has no idea this is happening in that moment. And so we have to.
So how come they can get away with that? I just don't understand that. I mean, part of the obligation, the implied obligation of managing a property is that you manage it. You can't just be someone who's out of state and be absentee.
I agree with you. But from a legal perspective of what law enforcement can do, I don't see an avenue towards simply holding someone accountable only because they own the property, except, I'll give you this exception, except if we have a property that is a known problem over and over and over again, and we document that, then we can pursue the civil injunctions of the house being a public nuisance, which is a much bigger challenge. But there is teeth to that, where if we show that a property owner is engaging in a house of ill repute, I think is the actual language, that we can begin the process of civilly seizing the house or the property. But that's still a civil response to the issue. It's not a criminal issue. That's something that county council will have.
Yeah, I guess my only editorial comment is that it's hard for me to separate the changes in here that you've made, which I wholeheartedly support, for all the one and done things, with the fact that, it seems like these property owners that are acting in bad faith have sort of figured out a way to get the government to pay for the thing that is their responsibility as property owners, and which requires an immense expenditure of public resources, not just 1 year, but every year as new residents cycle in and out. Meanwhile, the property owners, they know what the laws are. They definitely know what's going on their property. And, there's just no mechanism here that compels them to sit at the table and be a part of the solution. So, I'm personally, with all of this, I struggle with it because it's hard for me to separate the fact that I disagree with the approach of how the enforcement is versus the obvious changes to the laws that I think everyone can agree with, full stop. So those are just my comments. Thank you, Chris.
All right, thank you for those questions and comments. We'll now go to the public. Is there any public comment on this item? Yes.
Actually, I have a couple questions here. So given the situation that we're in, where I live at, what we mostly get is trespassing and urinating in public. So that's in the 3 offenses. Now, let's say, for example, they're having a party this Friday night. It's Friday the 13th. That'd be a rager. So for the trespassing, to get the party shut down, that would have to be 3 incidences of trespassing onto our property. We would have to call you 3 times to report. Same thing with urinating in public.
It's not 3 of each one or of only one category. It's any combination.
Oh, any combination. So let's say we get 2 trespassers and 1 urinator, or 2 urinators and 1 trespasser. But I have to call on each one.
Well, this is where we can get into the minutia, but you calling after the fact and our deputies not witnessing it is not sufficient probable cause to make the citation or the arrest or the shut down the party.
What if it's on camera?
It does not. It has to be a deputy observing the behavior. So it has to be a deputy watching this happen in order for us to justify that. Right. And that's the case for any infraction of this. We have to visually observe it. So we have to.
So basically, in a nutshell, I'm screwed.
No, you're next to a known problem house, and the unfortunate part is that your problem house is not in the high traffic area that most of our enforcement ends up getting directed at. But I worked Friday night, and we sat outside the problem houses and we waited and watched and did our counts. And so that's how we solved that problem.
All right, I think we have a comment on Zoom. Mark, go ahead.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I guess I just want to understand and clarify. It seems like there is a distinction being made, but I worry it's not being made thoughtfully here between, I guess, posts that are enabling and encouraging bad behavior and versus kind of individual sort of incidents. And I think my concern is that and I'm sorry, I'm hearing some feedback. is that if there's a certain individual that enters a party and they start doing a certain bad activity, like let's say they decide to stage dive, the host decides to get punished for that, even though there's kind of no control over that single individual, and maybe that single individual is doing exactly what the host does not want. And I think that's like some of the thing I would want to clarify here. Versus like on the other side of things is like if a host enables the vandalism of vehicles, I think that should be a one and done offense. And so I just want to try to understand, and I'm sorry, the feedback is really hard for me to hear. I'll clarify like what an individual does that should be punished to the host versus what an individual does that should be punished just to the individual. That's all my comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you for those comments. I think I'll try not to ask. I believe I understand what these changes are, but the comment was asking if one were to stage dive, would the resident or the host occupant of the home be charged with stage diving even if they were not supported? The idea is they would not be charged with stage diving, but their party could get shut down or they could be asked to shut down their party. Correct. Right. You're right. Okay. Is there any other board comment or question on this item? All comments that are in support of these updates. I'm also previously happy to hear from residents that they support these updates. Happy to hear from guests and also board members that they support amendments and others will be supporting this. So that's good. Do we have a motion on this item? All right, is there any public comment on this motion? No public comment, so we'll go to a vote. All directors who are in favor of this motion, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say no. And this motion passes 6-0-0-1. Thank you, Lieutenant, for very well questions. We'll now move on to item 4.4, support for unlisted businesses. Okay, I'll keep this one quick. You guys received a letter from 4 businesses in IVCSD who are being impacted by a change to the law that happened January 1st. We're working with our state legislative offices and the county to figure out a solution. And it's a fast-acting situation, so we're asking the board to authorize us to submit letters of support for the businesses as necessary. And if there's anything else we need to bring back to the board for action, of course we will. But essentially, the problem is the businesses now that are being compelled to comply with the state law that requires them to either have a recycling center within a mile away from them or to process CRP themselves, which means extra staff, extra recycling system, more work they can't afford. So we're working on a solution, but it's just fast moving. And so I don't know, there might be opportunities in the letter next week on recycle, but we don't have the specifics of what we want to submit yet. So we're asking the board to give us some authorization to put forward letters of support, and then we'll come back to this other solution. We found a space to get recycling center as the hindsight solution. Thank you for that. Is there any questions from the board at this time? So does this letter include support for the Assembly bill that Assembly Park wrote about the power cycle grant program that's all the governor's asked? Yeah. Okay, well, I'd like for us to include that because the bill is clear. I just didn't know about the bill, but it says the letters of support as necessary. So, okay, well, I just want to highlight it because it's changing the way that the power cycle grant structure is specifically to provide grants for local governments to purchase balers and things like that, that I think would
council.
It's been a request from the IV Food Co-op actually, is to get a baler for IV.
So I just think since I know I saw it this morning, it's on the governor's desk, but hasn't been signed yet, so.
Okay, 4 days.
All right, are there any other questions from board members at this time?
I have a question.
Yes.
What I was struck by in this issue is why, if this was enacted as of February 1st, 2023, why has it taken so long for IV businesses to raise this as an issue? I'm just curious.
They brought it up in March. And then
To us?
To us on the county, and then there was a grace period. So now the grace period is over and the
got it.
fines, or it's technically not a fine. It's an option to pay $100 or comply.
So it's not a required fine?
It's hard to describe, but it's like, it's an in lieu of complying with the law. So it's not a fine, like a legal technical definition of a fine. The $100 a day. So they can pay $100 a day or comply.
Ah, got it.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions at this time? All right, I'll go to the public. Is there any public comment on this item? Yes.
So if I'm getting this right, the whole idea is to promote recycling in Isla Vista, with plastic bottles and things like that. 3 names come to mind. One is Helena, the other one is Buckets, also known as John, and Frank. And these are individuals that go through recycle bins to get recyclables. There's quite a few others. I know them all. I run into them on my bike rides and jogs and stuff. One things that they always, one thing is that they all have in common is they have to go to the recycle center out in Goleta, 3.5 miles away. The most impressive is John Buckets. He's got this wagon train of 6 shopping carts with huge bags. And I don't know how he maneuvers that thing, but he maneuvers that from Isla Vista to the recycling center in Goleta. Jorgina, she's like 70 years old. She walks the stuff over there. Same thing with Frank, he kind of pushes his cart. Regardless, what I've always pushed for is having a recycle center back in Isla Vista. I know it's a costly adventure or venture, whatever you want to call it. And like Jonathan mentions, space or property to have that. I've always felt that behind a supermarket would be a good idea for health reasons and stuff like that. And just, but one space that's possibly available for such a venture would be what was a car wash behind the keg and bottle store. So I would think that might be a good location to look into or something like that. But, I believe in recycling. We do our share of it, but it's just kind of difficult to watch these people having a lot of the stuff 3.5 miles away, and a lot of them don't have viable means of transportation. So something to consider is if it does weigh into with this proposal. So just want to throw that out there. There are people that rely on these recyclables, and they need all the help they can get.
All right, thank you for those comments. Are there any commenters on Zoom?
Yes, we have one.
Okay.
When it rains, it
May
pours,
they
huh?
please speak?
It's somebody who's on their phone, so I don't know how they can.
All right,
Yeah. Star 7 or star 6?
if you are.
Testing, can I be heard?
Yes, we can hear.
All right, this is Mark again, but move to the phone. So I want to speak to the breadth of the item, which is support for Isla Vista businesses, which is I think something that the IVCSD should be doing, and something that local governments generally will try to do something preferential to support their businesses compared to neighboring cities' businesses. And I'm going to speak in almost a broader scope than the specific item, which is I've long kind of had issue, and I think that there has been systemic issues on a traffic level with the amount of 18-wheeler semi-trucks that come into Isla Vista for the sake of produce delivery, supply delivery, et cetera. And I always thought that something that it would be fantastic that if Isla Vista CSD could do to support small businesses is serve as an intermediary supply chain for those businesses, have a sort of third-party site property that could take in and be designed in for the sake of 18-wheeler delivery. I'm thinking about like the site that's where like the Model Munger Hall is for UC Santa Barbara, some sort of between Isla Vista and UCSB, where you could have vans or small trucks bring in produce and supply for the small businesses, but have that be the kind of third-party place that semi-trucks can actually do their offloading. And I guess the reason this is relevant to this item is I feel like that this could be a similar and complementary idea, is that if we're thinking about the way that we're handling the recycling, maybe, I'm not even sure if this includes compostables, but I think it may soon, based on California state law, include compostables in the next 2 to 5 years, is that there should be, I think, the Isla Vista CSD can serve as a third-party sort of intermediary, serving the functions that otherwise businesses would have to probably spend on themselves to have someone handle their recycling for them, and kind of do that service for them. And I think that's the way that we can like support our small businesses, serve as a supply chain intermediary, whether that supply chain's being waste or that supply chain being the produce and supply that they might otherwise get through a Cisco delivery, for an example, that can, like I said, come from a third-party site, so that semi-trucks don't have to come into Isla Vista and vice versa. Small businesses don't have to individually lug all of their recycling out to Goleta on a day-to-day basis. So that's the food for thought I've had, and how to support our small businesses in Isla Vista, which have a detriment, a significant amount of barriers against them. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Are there any further public comments on this item? See none, so I'll go back to the board. Is there any board comment on this item? Director Brand.
I move approval of staff recommendation.
I will second.
All right, we have the motion by Director Brandt and the second by Director Craig. Is there any public comment on this motion? See none, so I'll go to a vote. All directors who are in favor of this motion, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say no. And this motion passes 6-0-0-1. Now we'll move on to item 4.5, Del Playa temporary restrooms update.
No action or anything to take, just update that we have 3 restrooms out of the 5 we funded up. The county has 1, and we changed the servicing from 2 days to 5 days a week from our books, so they'll be out more often to check on them.
And are the 5 days a week just the main weekdays, the business days? We don't know
what the
exactly.
5 days are. The county handles the contract, so I asked them to make it 5.
Got it.
And keep them right side up.
Well, that's what they will do when they come those 5 days.
Is there any board question on this item? Yes.
I know we've all got the pictures of the bathrooms being upended, and I'm struck by it's horrible. And I just I guess, I think it was a good idea, right? We were responding to a situation where we thought there's this problem, and then we could respond with these bathrooms, but I just wonder, is this really a solution? I think in the agenda, you said something about looking at how to, read somewhere about making these more permanent, or maybe more structurally better, so that they're not just something that's easily tipped. Is that part of?
Well, that's in Laura's 8-point plan.
Oh, it was? I knew I read
but
it somewhere.
A permanent
Okay.
restroom will cost hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Because of
No, I
water
know.
and sewage connections. So
Yeah. When I mean more something a little bit more structural that just can't be upended, because then why are we putting them out there? It's window dressing, right?
yeah, we can try to see. I mean, we've already asked if they can put sandbags or something to hold them down, but
Yeah. Okay, well, that's good.
Are there any other board questions at this time?
I don't think we got any complaints from this weekend.
That's good.
Director Bray.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. No complaints this weekend, clean weekend, and just wanted to say a big thank you to all of you, because I know you get the complaints and you have to actually do something about it. It's one thing for us to just look at the pictures. So thanks for the attention there.
All right, I'll go to public comment. Is there any public comment on this update? Yes.
Aside from Lieutenant Tess, the last person standing, the whole idea behind putting the porta potty out there was a great intention. But what really saddens me, disturbs me, is that this great intention designed to prevent another tragedy is being, how should I say, it's being treated in a way by the same people it's designed to protect. People partying on Del Playa. That thing spent more time horizontally than it did vertically. And dumped chemicals into the soil, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you guys heard all the complaints, you guys know all the logistics behind that. It's just saddening to me that it was done by a group of good people, all of you. It was a great intention, but it's being treated in a way that is just highly disrespectful to not just the community, not just to you guys, but the community as well. I mean, remember what I talked about a couple of weeks ago? I said about attitudes. This is what you're dealing with. It's attitudes. It's not, we can talk about all these preconceived ideas about it, but it's attitude. And it's just saddening to see that. Now, with regards to what to do about it, instead of focusing on the problem, I'd like to focus on a possible solution. There may be a way that Marboard can bolt that thing down on skids and then drill into the ground and possibly anchor it to where it'd be near to impossible to knock over. It can be done. I've worked in construction long enough to know how to do these things, and it can be done. It'll take a little bit of work on their part, but that thing, I hate to say it's going to spend more time horizontally than vertically. And I think one way to keep it vertical is to take an approach, a proactive structural approach that will keep it upright. So something to consider. It would just take, mounting onto a set of skids, like a pallet skid, and then just drilling and just anchoring down somehow. So something to maybe propose to Marboard about.
Thank you for those comments. Seeing no further public comment, I'll go to the board for board discussion. Do any board members want to discuss or ask questions on this item? All right, I see none. So I'll just say I'm thankful that we got this update. I'm glad that we have more clear information. I can't think of a better solution or a better avenue to try and look into than what we've heard in public comment and other questions. I know there's been other porta potties in Isla Vista that are a lot larger that don't seem to be tipped over as much, or I wasn't made aware of them being tipped over. I think there was one near Little Acorn Park for a while during COVID, and it was like a much larger porta potty. I think it was ADA compliant. And so that might not fit into certain spaces we've decided on in order to help with partiers, but it could be a lot harder to tip over and expand access to more parts of the population. But yeah, something that I heard recently, and maybe we can consider that. But I don't have more firm direction I need to share. All right.
Let's see what happens.
All right. Thank you all. And is that enough? Yeah. Okay. We will move on to item 4.6, ad hoc committee on district internal organization.
Yeah, I know it sounds maybe vague, but to me, it's, I think we need to be looking ahead of the budget for next year at our staff structure. And we're trying different things with our staff structure right now, with our interim position and how we're doing our festivals and just the whole organization as a whole. We've grown so much. We've added 4 new positions in the last year. So I think it just takes it. We need to take a look, which we've talked about at our retreat, but we've never actually had a real conversation about it. So we'd like to do it in an ad hoc committee in private before going back to the board.
Got it. Do any board members have questions on this? I want to plug that I get to have a lot more conversations with our general manager when we work on the agendas and other things that come up. And I realize how we're doing a lot as a district, and I want to have a safety plan for when folks are sick or tired or something maybe less dramatic than that, but we need to have strong support systems because we do a lot and we're growing rapidly. So I've kind of had this idea in my mind. Jonathan brought it up independently, and I fully support it. I don't want to take up space or anything. I don't know exactly how I would help individually, but I would like to help individually, but I want to make sure that others see this as an opportunity to contribute to the growth of our district.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is definitely something that I support, and you guys know best if this is something that you think is worth looking at. I definitely support that. Like Marcos, I would be enthusiastic to participate, but I also don't know that much about organizational structure of really like any type of business or governmental entity or things like that. So I don't know how useful I would be.
Oh, don't worry. I draw all the charts and everything myself, but I just, we need to know what you guys want to accomplish or what do we want to get done with our staff positions. And which ones do we're not like deleting positions. We're just saying, what do we want to get done? Are the positions we have the right ones?
Mm-hmm.
Did I hear organizational chart?
We have a chart already. It's been at the but yes, there'll be a new one.
Can I nominate Spencer for the committee?
He's so excited about the
He's so
org chart.
excited about this chart.
No, I'm looking at you because you're the one who's always asking for the org chart.
For like, yes, exactly. Who's who? What do they do? Who they're for too?
I think you're kind of light on committees this year.
Oh. Okay, well, what I was gonna say is, I hope no one was like that. What I was gonna suggest as part of this ad hoc is I would love to see if we could bring in like someone who's more of an organizational specialist to give ideas on kind of best practices. So, because I think we all have great ideas, but I think we always benefit from getting a little bit of outside expertise. And I think there's probably ways to do that that are low, no cost. So that would be my only suggestion. Are you really suggesting? My master's is in like organizational leadership.
That's perfect.
Now I am like suggesting you.
Were you suggesting me?
Now I am after you said that. Now I'm definitely suggesting.
And just to be clear, I was.
You were too? Oh, I don't know if that's good or bad. Yeah, I am light on. I did get off parking.
Are there any other board members who are interested in this committee?
Can we only have 2?
3.
Oh, I would love to have Olivia be involved, only because I think it's really important if it's not your skill set but you're something that you're interested in, I think it's a great opportunity to work together on something that you can learn from and be involved in.
Absolutely. And I think that's how I look at a lot of the committees too, especially like finance.
Oh yeah, you're already on some big ones.
But I'm learning all the time.
Oh,
so.
maybe you shouldn't do it then, because you're already on some serious ones.
I like committees.
Well, maybe I want to do
I
it.
think they're fun.
Whoever.
All right. Well, so is this a motion merely on forming, or is this
just a form?
Okay. So it sounds like we have some good interest on this committee. I want to, I'll go to public comments, see if there's any public comment on the board forming an ad hoc committee on district internal organization. All right, I see no public comment on this. Is there any further board conversation on this? See none. Is there any motion on this item?
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
All right, we have the motion by Brandt and the second by Topliff. Is there any public comment on this motion? I see no public comment on this motion, so now we'll go to a vote. All directors who are in favor of this motion, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say no. And this motion
For the record, I
passes-
did say aye. Just
I know,
wait.
I heard. This motion passes 6-0-0-1.
Okay.
And that concludes our discussion and action items for the night. And now we get to move on to our fifth section, reports. We'll go to reports from members of the board. I will start with the light report. Earlier this month, I was a part of the Goleta Library Advisory Commission. And there we are working with the interim library director, who is making agile moves to update policies for the Goleta Library. So we're looking at a lot of things, but I'm also learning about things that I wish that I knew about before to promote. I think that are really ample opportunities to promote for Isla Vista. So I learned about a program called the ZIP book, which is funded by California State Libraries grant. So the Goleta City Library receives $17,000 to fund this program, in which a user who has a library card and signs up for the Zip Book app can, with their device, whether it's their phone or their laptop or even in the library, order a book from a Amazon-based portal that is not in the library's current collection and have it mailed to their house for free to the user, for free to the library that is spent on grant funds. And then the user is allowed to check out 3 items at a time. In order to go to the next item, they need to return one of those 3 items to the Goleta Branch Library, in which the staff of the Goleta Branch Library will decide whether or not they're going to add this item to the collection. I was pleased to see that books had a upper limit of $50, and non-traditional materials like audiobooks, etc., have a $75 limit. So it's a really great program, and I feel like one that Isla Vistans of all different ages and all different literacy levels can take huge advantage of. It also fully complements the ideas that we've talked about as barriers for Isla Vista, and the fact that a material is delivered to your house. It is my understanding that you do still have to take the item back to the library location, maybe not necessarily the book van. I don't know exactly on that. I need to get more clarification on that. But I will be hopefully meeting with their library director soon. They're also working on a strategic plan update. They want their strategic plan to be 5 years looking out. I'm sure I'll ping some of the other library commission folks for ideas on how to incorporate Isla Vista needs into this strategic plan. And we had our most recent parking committee update, and those are going swimmingly. I also had the chance to talk with a Newshawk reporter about our parking study and how it's going, and the fact that we will be releasing a survey soon. So hopefully we can all get moving on that. Yes, and then a couple other updates. Me and Director Brandt got to table with the CSD at the Know Your Resources Fair during week 1 of UCSB's quarter. And I was also invited to a panel discussion later in the month around restorative justice. The panel will be on October 17th by our local EVPLA. So I'm excited for that. I got some homework to do and learn about more RJ for panel discussion. But yeah, that concludes my report. If any other board members have reports they'd like to share.
Very cool.
Director Brandt.
Well, you mentioned that we got to be at the EVPLA Resources Fair, so thank you to associate students for that awesome event. I thought we got to talk to a lot of great people. And then I got to go do some tabling in the arbor, which is my favorite thing to do, with our staff, particularly Fiona, who I'm really excited is back on the team after her trip. And yeah, just was a moment where I was like just really proud of everything that we prioritize as an organization for community engagement. Got to have some really great conversations. And the second thing is just that I requested at a past meeting that we have a presentation from a UCSB researcher who has done a thesis on bluff erosion, just as an informational item so that we can all become educated. And it sounds like that's gonna happen at our next board meeting. So just want to keep you informed on that.
All right, any other directors with reports like to share?
It's almost my bedtime.
All right, well, I'll move on to item 5.2, reports from the standing and ad hoc committees. Are there any standing and ad hoc committees that would like to share reports? All right, I see none there, so we'll go to our report from district council. Are there any updates to share?
Not at this time. No, thank you.
All right, thank you. And then now a report from general manager and staff.
So like Spencer mentioned, we're tabling every day this month. So if you want to join and meet the public and talk about what we do, you can let me or Maya know. And then I also sent you all an email to invite you to the event for the compost collective this Saturday from 4 to 7. And to speak if you'd like to for the relaunch event, cut the ribbon. We haven't done the ribbon cutting in a long time, so it'll be one of them. IV Safe is going to be October 25th from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. And then we'll set a regular recurring time at that date. We had a good meeting with the county on collaborating to get better information out to tenants between our rental housing mediation program and what they do. There was a lot of gaps between, they didn't have updated information on their website. It's still mentioned to call the Santa Barbara City Rental Mediation Program, which hasn't been in effect for 6 or 7 years. And not our program, not on the website.
Yeah.
So I just noticed that recently and we're gonna be up on there now. The buildings are really busy. This building will probably be tented next week for termites. Surprise for termites. But that's at least being taken care of very fast. The clinic let the county know and they're on it to schedule it. The parking survey should launch either Thursday or Friday. So it's almost done. So please help get the word out for that. And the festival for Halloween is all green. Everything's going ahead great. And so it's October 28th, 12 to 6. So remember to let people know. And Jay would like me to remind you that the CSDA meeting is on October 23rd.
He's such a
in
goofball.
Dealton.
We all need to just show up once,
Yeah.
just to freak him out.
I don't think I have anything else major to report besides that hasn't been at the meeting.
All right, thank you from that update. We'll now move to our future meeting dates and future agenda items. Do any directors wish to request future agenda items at this time? Director Brandt.
This is not a time sensitive thing, but Carrie and I had a conversation recently about just doing more sort of honorary stuff at our board to honor some of the great community organizations and creating some sort of a system where each meeting a different director gets to honor an organization or a group or just a thing happening in Isla Vista. So not urgent at all, but it'd be great for us to talk about how that could work in the future.
Got it. Right.
That would be maybe tied into creating a recognition policy.
Oh, okay. Is that something that policies work on?
It's not on the list, but it can be on the
It's
list.
something that normally would guide then, similar to our art policy, which is so successful.
All right. Yes.
On that note, I'm in a lot of traditional ecological knowledge classes right now, which are all about the indigenous people to this land. And it's been brought to my attention that land acknowledgements should be done to groups of indigenous people to themselves. And I don't know if that's something the district has ever done, but if it's not, I do think we should make a point at one of our meetings. I have contacts of a lot of the people involved in the Chumash Coastal Band, the governmental organization. So to maybe have some of them at our meeting and give like a formal land recognition to them.
We can
We
ask
give
you.
one to them.
Yes.
They come to our meet. Oh,
That's already happened, but we can
That's
ask them to
interesting.
come back. When
It
we
did happen?
when we did the land
Okay.
acknowledgement, they were there and they helped design it.
The former chair,
Okay,
the
cool.
former chair of the coastal band helped us write it.
Cool.
Oh, that's
Okay.
very
Yeah, I
cool.
just wanted to make sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah, ample time
But
for
it's,
an
but I like the
update
idea.
or more invitation.
Yeah.
It's a great idea.
What? What's happening?
There's a termite in the
Oh.
ceiling. I was just showing the picture that I found online.
So
The one that matches the one in the ceiling.
It's like.
It's not, it's
It'll be done in a
so
week.
close to me. Sorry.
No, it's definitely, I've heard a lot of termite season.
It'll be done this in a week.
All right, well, so I'll just iterate that the next regular meeting of the board of directors will take place on October 24th, 2023 at 6 p.m. on Zoom and at the community room here, 970 Embarcadero Del Mar, Isla Vista, California. And with that, I will adjourn our meeting.